What if I told you that one of television's most beloved sweethearts vanished without a trace? That the woman who once lit up millions of living rooms with a smile quietly stepped away from the spotlight, only to leave behind a trail of eerie silence, strange coincidences, and questions that still haven't been answered? This isn't just another forgotten celebrity story. This is about Lori Saunders, the bright-eyed star of Petticoat Junction, who seemed to have it all, only to disappear so suddenly. It was like she'd never existed at all. No farewell tour, no final interview, just gone. The more you dig, the more you realize her end wasn't just quiet, it was chilling. And once you hear the facts, you'll never see Lori Saunders the same way again. A Star is Born. Lori Saunders wasn't always Lori Saunders. She was actually born Linda Marie Hines on October 4, 1941 in Kansas City, Missouri. Pretty regular beginning, nothing flashy, no Hollywood connections, no silver spoon. Just a Midwestern girl who eventually made it big in a way few small-town kids ever do. Her family moved to Los Angeles when she was still young, which is where everything really started to shift for her. Now, Lori was always into the arts. She loved performing, singing, dancing, acting, the whole deal. You could say she had that classic, born for the stage kind of vibe. She studied acting under the legendary Jeff Corey, a man who trained tons of famous faces, and that really set the foundation for her career. She wasn't just pretty, she was putting in the work early on, sharpening her skills in an industry that chews people up and spits them out if they're not ready. She started doing small stuff, little TV gigs, background parts, commercials, that kind of thing. Nothing major at first, but she was persistent. And then came the role that would change everything. Bobbie Jo Bradley on Petticoat Junction. That's when she stopped being Linda Hines and became Lori Saunders, literally. She changed her name around this time to stand out more in the industry, and it worked. The audience loved her. She stepped into the role in 1965, taking over from another actress, and totally made it her own. That role made her a household name. Overnight, she was this bright, charming face on American TV, playing the sweet, bookish daughter in a wholesome, light-hearted show that people just couldn't get enough of. And while the character might have seemed simple, Lori had a way of giving Bobbie Jo depth and warmth. That was her breakout moment, no question about it. From there, the doors of Hollywood cracked open just wide enough to let her in. The glory days. Getting the role of Bobbie Jo Bradley wasn't just luck for Lori Saunders, it was timing, preparation, and the ability to step into some pretty big shoes. You see, Petticoat Junction had already been on the air for a couple of seasons when the original Bobbie Jo, played by Pat Waddell, left the show. That's when Lori came in. She auditioned and nailed it. The producers needed someone who could bring a fresh energy to the character but still keep the vibe of the show intact. And Lori had that charm, this mix of sweet and spirited that just clicked. Her version of Bobbie Jo was less of the quiet bookworm and more bubbly and full of life, and fans embraced her pretty much immediately, which is no small feat when you're replacing someone beloved. Now, the chemistry between the three actresses who played the Bradley sisters, Lori Saunders, Meredith McRae, who played Billie Jo, and Linda Kay Henning as Betty Jo, was part of what made the show so addictive. On screen, they felt like real sisters, teasing each other, supporting each other, getting into innocent mischief around the shady rest hotel. But what made it even better was that they genuinely got along off-screen too. There was a real sense of camaraderie behind the scenes, which helped make their performances feel warm and believable. It wasn't all drama and ego like a lot of Hollywood sets, at least not between the girls. They had fun, and that fun translated into the final product. Petticoat Junction was a hit. It was part of that rural comedy wave alongside Green Acres and the Beverly Hillbillies, and people loved it. Lori became a familiar face in millions of homes across America. She wasn't just playing a role, she became Bobbie Jo in the eyes of the public. That's a blessing and a curse. The fame was huge. It brought her recognition, fan mail, and the kind of celebrity status that was hard to ignore. But it also boxed her in. Once the show ended, Hollywood couldn't seem to see her as anything but Bobbie Jo. That kind of typecasting was brutal, especially in an industry that already had limited roles for women at the time. Behind the curtains. Behind the scenes, Lori Saunders lived a life that was a lot quieter than the one most fans imagined. While she played bubbly, charming characters on screen, her personal life was grounded and, honestly, kind of refreshingly normal compared to most Hollywood stories. She married Bernard Sandler, a talent agent, and they stayed together for decades. No scandals, no dramatic tabloid headlines, just a stable marriage in an industry where that's practically unheard of. They also had 2 kids together and raised them outside the public eye, which Lori seemed to prefer. She wasn't trying to turn her family into some Hollywood dynasty, she just wanted a real life, something solid and away from all the flashing lights. Even during the height of her fame, Lori didn't come across as someone obsessed with being a celebrity. Sure, she enjoyed the success, the fan mail, the red carpet moments, but she was never one to chase controversy or stir up attention just to stay relevant. That didn't mean she was free from pressure, though. Being on a popular show like Petticoat Junction came with its own kind of stress. There were always expectations to stay young, stay cheerful, stay marketable. That's tough for anyone, but especially for women in Hollywood at the time. You were either the fresh-faced girl next door or yesterday's news, there wasn't much in between. And Lori fit so perfectly into that sweet, wholesome role that it became hard for casting directors to imagine her as anything else. There were always little rumors floating around, mostly harmless stuff about her possibly retiring early or stepping back because she didn't want to play the game anymore. And honestly, there might be some truth to that. After Petticoat Junction wrapped up and the rural TV trend started fading, her roles got fewer and farther between. She did a few guest spots here and there, like in The Beverly Hillbillies, and movies like Bloodbath and A Day at the White House, but she never had another breakout moment. Some people thought she was pushed out by Hollywood's shifting tastes, while others believed she just decided she was done with it. The reality? It was probably somewhere in the middle. Lori never made a dramatic exit. She didn't hold a press conference or write a tell-all book. She just quietly stepped back and started focusing on things that made her happy, like art, photography, and working with animals. She wasn't bitter or angry. She didn't try to claw her way back into the spotlight. It was like she had made peace with it all. She'd had her moment, she'd made her mark, and that was enough. In a business built on constant reinvention and attention-seeking, that kind of graceful exit is rare and, honestly, kind of admirable. Her swing at music. Back in the 1960s, Lori Saunders took a swing at something beyond the screen, music. It wasn't a total left turn, considering the wholesome musical vibes of Petticoat Junction, but it definitely showed another side of her. She released a single titled Lonely Christmas, a soft, melancholic holiday tune that didn't exactly shoot to the top of the charts, but it had that earnest charm fans expected from her. The B-side, Out of Your Mind, was a bit edgier, more of a garage rock gem than a syrupy TV tie-in. It didn't get much attention at the time, but years later, that very song ended up on the cult compilation Girls in the Garage Volume 2, a collection of obscure 60s tracks by female artists that music lovers now treat like buried treasure. Suddenly, decades later, people were rediscovering Lori Saunders not just as a TV actress, but as a contributor to that gritty, underrated world of vintage girl rock. And it wasn't just a solo venture. Lori teamed up with her Petticoat Junction co-stars, Linda Kay Henning and Meredith McRae, and together they formed a short-lived singing group called The Girls from Petticoat Junction. It was a classic 1960s marketing move. Take 3 popular TV actresses, put them in matching outfits, and let them sing catchy tunes. But it worked, at least for the fans. They released a few singles, including If You Could Only Be Me in 1968 and 30 Days Hath September. Both songs were sweet, light, and very much of their time, bubblegum pop meets country twang, with a touch of innocence and girl-next-door appeal. Reception-wise, the music didn't exactly cause a national frenzy, but among Petticoat Junction fans, it was a hit. Kids who watched the show were thrilled to hear Bobbie Jo, Betty Jo, and Billie Jo sing together in real life. For them, it was like the show had jumped off the screen and into the record player. The songs weren't revolutionary, but they were catchy and comforting, the kind of tunes you'd expect to hear in a 1960s diner or on an AM radio during a lazy afternoon. Now, those tracks have a second life. The girls from Petticoat Junction 60s Sounds compilation brought all their recordings together, and nostalgia collectors have embraced it. It's not just fans of the show who care anymore. Vintage music lovers, vinyl collectors, and garage rock enthusiasts have started paying attention. There's this almost retroactive respect now, like people realizing, hey, this wasn't just a cute gimmick, these women were actually putting out solid music for their time. Lori might have never been a chart-topping singer, but that little pocket of her career, those recordings with her co-stars, showed another layer of her talent. And now, oddly enough, that long-forgotten music is part of how she's being remembered. It's kind of poetic, really. Decades after she faded from the spotlight, her voice is still echoing, on old records, in compilation albums, and through speakers of people who never even saw Petticoat Junction in its original run. It's one of those strange little legacies that time quietly preserves. The subtle spotlight exit. Lori Saunders' exit from Hollywood wasn't just quiet, it was practically ghost-like. One moment, she was a familiar face on TV reruns, smiling as Bobbie Jo Bradley, and the next, it was like she'd vanished. No farewell tour, no final movie or emotional goodbye interview. She didn't try to squeeze out every last drop of fame like so many others from her era. She just stopped. The strangest part was that there was no big explanation. Nothing official ever came out to say, this is why Lori Saunders left the business. It was as if the industry moved on without asking questions. And so did she. That abruptness is what makes it feel unsettling. Here was someone who had been in people's homes week after week, who still had that youthful glow and charisma even in her later appearances, and then she was gone. No dramatic scandal, no tragic downfall, just a full stop. Fans who remembered her from Petticoat Junction or even her lesser-known film roles started noticing something was off. She didn't pop up at nostalgic reunion specials. She didn't do the fan conventions. She wasn't on talk shows reflecting on the golden days. And for someone who had such a gentle public image, her silence became louder over time. It made people wonder, was something going on behind the scenes? Did she get burned out? Pushed out? Or did she see something in Hollywood that made her want to disappear? Now, while Lori never outright slammed the industry, there were whispers in interviews and reports over the years that she wasn't all that enchanted with the way things worked. She once mentioned how limiting the roles were and how quickly Hollywood forgets women once they're past their prime. There was no big takedown, no names dropped, but you could feel the disappointment underneath her words, like someone who had seen enough to know she didn't want to stick around and play the game anymore. Then came the more curious shifts. People who did catch glimpses of her later on said she looked different, thinner, more fragile, almost like the energy had been drained out of her. Others said she'd become more private, almost reclusive, preferring to spend time with animals rather than people. Some former co-stars tried reaching out over the years but couldn't get through. A few even said they hadn't heard from her in decades. It wasn't just retirement, it was like she'd erased herself from Hollywood altogether. And maybe that was her way of taking control. Maybe Lori saw how brutal the industry could be, how it lifted you up only to toss you aside once you didn't fit the mold anymore, and she wanted nothing to do with that cycle. So instead of clinging to the spotlight, she let it go before it could chew her up and spit her out. Still, there's something haunting about it all. The way she slipped into silence without ever really telling her side of the story. The sudden shift in presence and appearance. The mystery of someone who once brought so much warmth into people's homes and then quietly walked away like none of it ever happened. It makes you wonder what really goes on behind the curtain, what the camera doesn't show, and who people become once the fame fades. Chilling theories about her exit. The final years of Lori Saunders' life are where things get a little eerie, unsettling even. Not in a loud or scandalous way, but in that slow, quiet kind of disappearance that creeps up on you when no one's really paying attention. Although it was abrupt and people began to ask questions, they soon began to make up their own theories, which spread like wildfire. After decades of near-total silence, fans began asking, whatever happened to Bobbie Jo? Where did she go? Was she okay? But there were never any clear answers, just shadows and fragments. Lori didn't have a big public decline. There was no TMZ footage of her being wheeled out of a hospital, no tragic tell-all interview, no paparazzi catching her in a moment of desperation. In fact, part of what made her final years so strange is how little we know. The physical and emotional details are hazy at best. There were whispers, of course, rumors that she'd lost a lot of weight, that her energy was gone, that she looked almost unrecognizable in the few rare sightings that made it to public eyes. But nothing confirmed. Nothing concrete. Friends, what few remained in contact, have said in passing that Lori became more withdrawn as time went on. Some said she didn't return calls. Others admitted they hadn't seen her since the early 2000s. She reportedly spent most of her later life in a quiet, secluded home, surrounded by animals and artwork, far away from the cameras and lights that once defined her world. There were no public breakdowns, but there also wasn't much connection, just a slow, isolating fade. It's unclear if she struggled with any major illness, but people have speculated. The way she disappeared so completely, no interviews, no appearances, no social media, suggests either deep emotional burnout or something heavier like depression or cognitive decline. Again, no family member ever spoke publicly about it. If she was sick, it was kept tightly under wraps. If she was lonely, no one knew just how badly. That silence became its own kind of mystery. Some say she was forgotten by Hollywood. Others believe she wanted to be. But what really chills people is that Lori seemed to vanish right when nostalgia for the golden TV era was booming. Her co-stars were doing interviews, reunions, fan conventions. Even actors with minor roles from that time found new attention and appreciation. Lori, though, stayed hidden. She didn't even show up for retrospectives of Petticoat Junction. Not a quote, not a cameo, nothing. It's like she erased herself from the story entirely. However, fans did receive one clue about what happened to Lori, and it's more concerning than you think. One of the last known photos of Lori surfaced on a fan forum, a grainy shot taken at a grocery store years after anyone had seen her. The woman in the photo was frail, quiet, with big sunglasses and a blank stare. The person who took it said they recognized her by chance, couldn't believe their eyes, and when they said her name aloud, she looked up just long enough to nod, then walked away without a word. There's something deeply symbolic about that. A star who lit up the screen with warmth and sparkle, reduced in the end to a nameless face in a supermarket aisle, fading out of frame like a final scene no one remembered to shoot. No big farewell, no final curtain call, just stillness. Whether Lori was running from something or simply choosing peace, we may never fully know. But there's a skin-crawling quiet to her ending. A Hollywood starlet who didn't crash and burn, but slowly dissolved into the background, leaving behind questions, memories, and a strange silence that still hasn't been broken. The memory of an icon. Even though Lori Saunders disappeared from public view, her memory didn't vanish completely. Petticoat Junction wouldn't let that happen. The show still runs in reruns, tucked into the corners of nostalgia channels and late-night schedules, reminding people of a simpler, sunnier era. And every time an episode airs, Lori's wide-eyed charm and gentle screen presence come back to life like a time capsule that refuses to close. She might not have become a massive household name like some of her contemporaries, but within the world of classic TV, she's iconic. Fans who grew up watching her as Bobbie Jo never stopped loving her. They share old clips online, trade stories in forums, and post rare magazine covers from the 60s like precious relics. She's frozen in that golden time forever, young, graceful, smiling, and for a lot of people, that's how they choose to remember her. Not as the woman who vanished from the spotlight, but as the sweet middle Bradley sister who made people laugh and feel comforted. But the deeper you think about it, the more Lori's story starts to say something much bigger, something uncomfortable. Her vanishing act wasn't just about one person's private decision. It taps into a recurring theme in Hollywood, especially for women. You can be beloved, talented, even successful, and still be tossed aside the moment your image no longer fits the fantasy. Lori was typecast early, boxed into the role of the wholesome beauty, and when she tried to branch out, the doors weren't exactly open. Hollywood didn't know what to do with her beyond pretty and sweet, and when she got older, it seemed like the industry just shrugged and moved on. That kind of erasure isn't new. It happens all the time, especially to actresses from her generation. They light up the screen for a while, draw millions of fans, then quietly get written out of the story once they age or stop playing the game. And most of the time, no one asks where they went. That's what makes Lori's story feel so haunting. It's not just about her. It's about all the others like her who vanish just as quietly. And maybe that's the final, chilling question her story leaves behind. What happens to the stars when the lights go out? Not just in a poetic sense, but literally when the scripts stop coming, the calls dry up, and the cameras stop rolling. Where do they go? Who remembers them? Does anyone reach out? Or do they fade into the silence, hoping someone might notice they're gone? Lori Saunders is still remembered, but in that eerie, bittersweet way where her presence feels more like a ghost from TV's past than a real person walking among us. She's there in reruns, frozen in time, smiling through a black and white screen, but behind that smile, there's a quiet mystery that never quite gets answered. And here's the thing, what the public saw and who Lori really was weren't exactly the same. On camera, she was this cheerful, radiant girl next door type, but in real life, she was more introspective. She loved painting, photography, animals, stuff that had nothing to do with TV. She wasn't chasing the spotlight 24/7. In fact, once the show ended and the roles started drying up, she didn't seem to fight too hard to stay in Hollywood's good graces. She didn't cause scenes or try to reinvent herself in a tabloid-worthy way. She just quietly faded out, which kind of added to the mystery later on. That duality, being adored by the public but misunderstood or overlooked by the industry, was a defining part of her story. Hollywood made her famous, but it never really let her grow. There is no telling what people are up to behind closed doors when no one is watching. But when it comes to the Hollywood stars on this list, there is no doubt that the golden age of Hollywood had its fair share of nastiness and pure lust. From being intimate with both men and women, to openly admitting seeking help from the nympho addiction, some of these stars knew they had a problem. But for others, they hid behind the veil of marriage. Regardless, they all had the same thing in common. They simply could not resist a good time in the sheets. Pamela Anderson. This amazing star has never been one to hold back when it comes to talking about her love life. Back in her younger days, she admitted in an interview that her libido was, in her words, uncontrollable. And honestly, it's not hard to see why people took notice. She wasn't just famous for her role on Baywatch, but also for her high-profile relationships with rock stars like Tommy Lee and Kid Rock. Even as she got older, Pamela didn't shy away from the subject. She embraced her image as a sensual symbol and kept things playful, sharing that she still enjoyed adding a little spice to her relationships. Her openness about physical intimacy and love has kept her in the spotlight as one of the most talked-about stars when it comes to libido. But here's the thing. Pamela's carefree and unapologetic attitude about her sexuality isn't just a phase or an act. It's been a core part of who she is from the start. She's never let society's expectations box her in, and that's probably why fans have always been so fascinated by her. Love her or not, you've got to admit, Pamela Anderson has always danced to the beat of her own drum. Vivien Leigh. She was far more complex than the glamorous image she portrayed on screen as Scarlett O'Hara. Beneath the surface of her dazzling career lay a life filled with personal struggles, heartbreak, and battles that would have overwhelmed many. Her Her relationships were often a focal point for public gossip, particularly her well-known affairs with co-stars like Robert Taylor and Peter Finch, even during her marriage to Laurence Olivier. While the tabloids painted her as scandalous, the truth of her life was far more nuanced and deeply human. Vivian's real challenge wasn't the judgment of others, it was the battle within herself. She suffered from bipolar disorder, a condition that was poorly understood at the time. It led to extreme mood swings that impacted her relationships, career, and overall well-being. Her struggles became even more pronounced after a devastating miscarriage in 1945, an event that many believe intensified her emotional pain and left scars that never fully healed. Her health challenges didn't stop there. The book, Reframing Vivian Leigh, details how she suffered from illnesses throughout her life, which added another layer of difficulty to an already turbulent existence. These health issues, along with the rumors and speculation they stirred, created an image of a troubled star in the public eye. But behind the headlines was a woman fighting battles most would never understand. Despite it all, Vivian remained remarkably resilient. She continued to pour herself into her craft, delivering performances that captivated audiences and cemented her place in cinematic history. On stage and screen, she exuded a magnetic presence that few could match, even as she wrestled with her inner demons. Elizabeth Taylor. Her love life was always making headlines, and for good reason. She got married 8 times, to 7 different men, and didn't hold back when it came to following her heart. The press loved to slap labels on her, calling her everything from unpredictable to wild, especially when her romance with Richard Burton hit the scene. That relationship was Hollywood drama at its peak. Both Elizabeth and Richard were married to other people when their affair started, which only added fuel to the media frenzy. But their connection was undeniable, and their on-again, off-again romance became one of the most talked-about love stories of all time. They had fiery arguments, grand reunions, and moments so passionate they could have been straight out of one of their movies. The thing about Elizabeth, though, is she never apologized for living her life the way she wanted. She once said, "I don't regret anything I've ever done," and she meant it. She wasn't about to let public opinion dictate how she lived or who she loved. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just a star, she was a force of nature. She loved deeply, made bold choices, and owned every moment of it. That's what made her unforgettable, not just her beauty or talent, but the way she lived life on her terms. Rita Hworth. Her love life was just as adventurous as her Hollywood career. Known for her beauty and elegance, she had a magnetic charm that made her one of the most sought-after stars of her time. But Rita's personal life was as dramatic as any of her films, filled with passion, heartbreak, and headline-making romances. She was married 5 times, each relationship capturing public attention in its own way. Her second husband, Orson Welles, was a creative genius, best known for Citizen Kane. Together, they were seen as a power couple, blending Hollywood glamour with artistic brilliance. But their marriage was far from perfect, and like many of her relationships, it didn't last. Then came Prince Ali Khan, the dashing son of the Aga Khan. Their affair caused an international stir. Rita was already a massive star, and Ali was one of the most eligible bachelors in the world. When they got married, it seemed like a real-life fairy tale, the movie star and the prince. But even that storybook romance had its troubles. Their relationship was marked by intense highs and lows, and they eventually divorced. Rita wasn't just someone who fell in love. She dove headfirst into it, living with passion and following her heart wherever it led her. But that kind of intensity came with its challenges. She once said, "Every man I knew fell in love with Gilda and woke up with me," referring to her famous role in the movie Gilda. It was a bittersweet reflection on how people often saw her as the glamorous character on screen rather than the real woman behind it. Beyond the rumors and gossip, Rita Hworth was a deeply human figure. She loved fiercely and openly, and she carried herself with grace even when things didn't work out. While her personal life was far from smooth, it's also what made her so relatable. Warren Beatty. While his career took off after the Golden Age, his romantic life was just as much a part of his legend as his acting. He was known for dating some of the biggest stars of the time, with his list of lovers reportedly numbering in the hundreds. Batty didn't just have a few flings. He was deeply involved with many women, including major names like Natalie Wood, Julie Christie, and even Madonna in the 80s. His charm and looks kept him in the headlines, but it was his personality that really fueled the gossip. Batty had a reputation for being confident and captivating, always able to win over whoever he set his sights on. His romantic relationships often became public spectacles, and he was rarely far from the tabloids. For years, he seemed to live in the spotlight, balancing his acting career with a relentless pursuit of romance. Despite his womanizing reputation, Batty eventually settled down with actress Annette Bening, a move that surprised many who had grown used to his bachelor lifestyle. But even then, the stories of his past relationships continued to follow him, ensuring that his place in Hollywood history was as much about his personal life as it was about his films. Marlon Brando. Known not just for his incredible acting, but also for his wild, unpredictable love life. With his smoldering looks and undeniable talent, Brando quickly became a heartthrob, but his personal life was as intense as his performances on screen. He had numerous relationships with both men and women, making headlines for his openness and rebellious nature. Brando wasn't shy about his romantic interests, and over the years he fathered 11 children with different partners. His love life was as complicated and unpredictable as his roles, with many ups and downs. From his passionate relationships to his unorthodox lifestyle, Brando lived life on his own terms, constantly challenging Hollywood norms. Despite his many romantic entanglements, Brando was known for being deeply private about his personal affairs, leaving many details about his relationships to speculation. Still, his love life became as much a part of his legendary status as his groundbreaking performances, proving that he was not only a force on screen but off it too. Gable. Often called the King of Hollywood, he was just as well known for his off-screen romantic life as he was for his iconic film roles. With his charm, good looks, and rugged appeal, Gable captured the hearts of women both on and off the screen. He was married 5 times, with each marriage making headlines in its own right. But it was his extramarital affair with actress Loretta Young that truly made waves. Their relationship resulted in a secret love child, a scandal that Hollywood tried to keep under wraps. Despite their affair happening while they were both married to other people, Young kept the child's existence a secret for many years, with Gable only acknowledging his daughter much later in life. This secret love affair and its fallout added a layer of complexity to Gable's otherwise polished public image. Gable's love life was often filled with drama, but it only added to the mystique of his public persona. His relationships were just as intense as his famous roles, and the stories behind them became as much a part of his life as the films that made him a legend. Zaza Gabor. A lot of people will go to great lengths to hide who they really are, especially when the rest of the world around them will not accept it. But not Zaza Gabor. This woman was bold, fearless, and unapologetic about her free-spirited lifestyle. With a personal life that kept the tabloids buzzing and known for her 9 marriages, she certainly wasn't shy about her love life. Each of her marriages seemed to be more high-profile than the last, and her relationships were often just as public. But it wasn't just her marriages that had people talking. Her flirtatious personality and quick wit made her one of Hollywood's most charming and talked-about stars. Gabor loved the attention, and she knew how to work the spotlight. Her reputation as a woman who was always in search of love and excitement was solidified by the countless rumored affairs and passionate relationships she had over the years. Zaza made no apologies for the way she lived her life, and she leaned into her role as a woman who refused to follow society's rules. Much like many other actresses of her time, Gabor was labeled by the public as a nymphomaniac, a term that reflected society's discomfort with women who openly expressed their desires. But in many ways, she and others like her were challenging the strict and often unfair expectations placed on women during Hollywood's golden age. They weren't just breaking hearts, they were breaking down barriers. showing that women could have control over their love lives and reject the conventional norms that were expected of them. Robert Mitchum. If there were ever a male version of Gabor, this would be him, just like her. Robert wasn't too keen on listening to what other people thought about him, and he lived his life regardless. He was the ultimate tough guy on screen, known for his gritty roles in noir films and westerns. But off-screen, his life was just as intense. Mitchum didn't just play bad boys, he lived like one too. He had a rebellious streak that made him a bit of a Hollywood maverick, and his personal life was filled with rumors of numerous affairs. Even though Mitchum was married for decades to his wife, Dorothy, his extramarital relationships were widely talked about. His rugged charm and laid-back attitude made him irresistible, and Hollywood couldn't help but be fascinated by his romantic entanglements. Mitchum didn't care much for the spotlight, but his love life added to the mystique of his public persona, with whispers about his love affairs and escapades never far from the tabloids. In a time when many actors tried to keep their personal lives under wraps, Mitchum's rebellious nature meant he was never one to follow the rules, whether in his roles or his relationships. His ability to balance a high-profile career with a secretive love life only made him more intriguing to the public, further cementing his legacy as one of Hollywood's most complicated and charismatic stars. Marilyn Monroe. We all know Monroe, don't we? So many things have been associated with her name: beauty, style, talent. But today, we will talk about her more intimate nature. She was Hollywood's ultimate bombshell, right? But her life off-screen was far from perfect. The media loved to paint her as a nymphomaniac because of her string of high-profile relationships, like her marriages to Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller. And of course, there were the infamous rumors about her affairs with President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert. All of that gossip made her love life a constant headline. But what the public didn't really see was how much deeper her struggles went. Marilyn wasn't just looking for love. She was emotionally vulnerable, craving acceptance, and battling inner demons that nobody really understood. Her tragic demise at just 36 in 1962 left more questions than answers about who she truly was. Marilyn might have been this glamorous, larger-than-life figure on screen, but in real life, she was one of Hollywood's most misunderstood stars. Her story is filled with mystery, and even today she remains an iconic figure, both admired and misjudged. Angelina Jolie. With a face that can turn heads and eyes that make you freeze in your boots, Angelina Jolie certainly has earned her place on this list. Her marriage to Billy Bob Thornton was the stuff of legend. Remember when they wore vials of each other's blood around their necks? It was a relationship that constantly made headlines, especially since they were so open about their love life, often discussing it in interviews. Jolie's relationships have always sparked a lot of attention, largely because of her undeniable chemistry with her partners. Former lovers have shared stories about her adventurous side, like her love of incorporating knives into her intimate moments, which only added fuel to the media fire. While these days, Jolie focuses more on humanitarian work and raising her kids, her earlier reputation as a passionate, wild lover still follows her. That part of her story has become just as much a part of her public image as her acting career. Lana Turner. Her love life was just as dramatic as the roles she played on screen. With 7 marriages and countless affairs, she built a reputation for being unable to resist romance. She had high-profile relationships with men like Tyrone Power and Howard Hughes, but it was her scandalous affair with gangster Johnny Stompanato that really grabbed the tabloids' attention. Their relationship took a dark turn when, in 1958, Lana's teenage daughter Cheryl Crane stabbed Stompanato to death, ending a story filled with passion and violence. The media had a field day painting Lana as a woman whose love life led to tragedy. She was often labeled a nymphomaniac, a tag that stuck with her for years. But despite everything, Lana lived life on her own terms. She may have faced heartbreak and public judgment, but she never let that stop her from seeking love and living in the spotlight, even if it meant living through the consequences of her passionate choices. Tula Bankhead. She was loud, unapologetically bold, and never afraid to go after what she wanted. In an era when women were expected to fit into neat little boxes, Tallulah smashed every stereotype with ease. One of the things that really made her stand out was her open bisexuality. This was shocking to a lot of people at the time, especially since it wasn't something anyone openly talked about back then. But Tallulah didn't hide it. She had passionate love affairs with both men and women, with famous names like actor Gary Cooper and singer Billie Holiday being among her lovers. She didn't just have relationships, she lived them out loud, and everyone knew about it. Her love life wasn't some private affair, it was part of her public persona. She was so open about it that people couldn't help but talk about her. One of her most famous quotes was, "My father warned me about men and booze, but he never said a word about women and cocaine." It's clear she had no intention of apologizing for her wild ways, and she lived exactly how she wanted to, without a care in the world about what others thought. The press, of course, loved to make her the subject of gossip, often labeling her a nymphomaniac because of her adventurous love life. But Tallulah didn't let those labels stick. To her, she was just being herself, living free, wild, and in the moment, without caring what anyone thought. She was unapologetic, and that's part of what made her so fascinating to everyone around her. Charlie Sheen. Known for living life on the edge, his history of relationships with hundreds of women, including porn stars and escorts, Charlie became public long before the shocking revelation of his HIV diagnosis in 2015. Sheen's wild ways weren't exactly a secret. His personal life was often a topic of conversation, with stories about his outrageous parties, erratic behavior, and infamous scandals filling the tabloids for years. Even after learning of his HIV diagnosis, Sheen didn't slow down. He continued living the same hedonistic lifestyle, partying hard and engaging in reckless behavior despite the consequences. This led to massive public backlash, with many criticizing him for not taking his health and responsibilities seriously. But even with all the controversy, Sheen remained one of the most talked about figures in Hollywood. His behavior often overshadowed his acting career, but he was still able to stay relevant, proving just how much controversy seemed to follow him wherever he went. Despite all the ups and downs, Charlie Sheen's name was always in the spotlight. Whether it was for his role in 2.5 Men, his dramatic breakdowns, or his headline-grabbing personal life, Sheen was one of those celebrities who couldn't escape the constant buzz around him, good or bad. His story is a prime example of how scandal and fame often go hand in hand in the world of Hollywood. Michael Douglas. He was one of Hollywood's biggest stars and shocked fans in the 1990s when he admitted to seeking treatment for bedroom addiction. Known for his smooth charm and being a ladies' man, Douglas had always been in the public eye for his high-profile relationships and romantic escapades. His first marriage ended in part because of his infidelity, and the tabloids were filled with stories about his flings. It seemed like his personal life was just as dramatic as his Hollywood career. But over time, Douglas opened up about his struggles. In the 1990s, he revealed that his issues went beyond just the thrill of being with women. It was more complex than that. He admitted that his addiction was just a part of a bigger picture of personal challenges he was facing, and he made the brave decision to seek help. This was a side of Douglas fans had never really seen, and it showed a more vulnerable, honest side of the actor. Through all of this, Douglas found stability in his marriage to actress Catherine Zeta-Jones. She stood by him through thick and thin, including some of the toughest moments in his life. When he was diagnosed with throat cancer, it was Catherine's support that helped him fight through it. Their relationship proved to be a rock for him, and it gave him a foundation he hadn't had before. Despite the public struggles and battles, Michael Douglas didn't let those define him. His career continued to thrive, with him taking on major roles and continuing to cement his place as a Hollywood icon. It was clear that while his personal battles had been tough, they didn't overshadow his talent or his legacy in the entertainment world. He became an example of someone who could overcome their demons and still come out on top, proving that everyone has their challenges, but it doesn't have to define who you are or what you do. She was the ultimate fantasy. The smoldering eyes, the hourglass curves, the presence that could bring a man to his knees. Sophia Loren wasn't just beautiful, she was also dangerous. The early phases. You know all those girls with pretty faces that just get lucky? Well, that wasn't Sophia Loren. She was born to be a star. Even as a child, she had this rare, breathtaking beauty that made people stop and stare. Big, mesmerizing eyes, delicate features, and a presence that seemed almost unreal. She wasn't just cute, she was stunning. The kind of girl who looked like she had stepped right out of a painting. But how was she living? Well, let's just say she looked nothing like her background. Sophia was born on September 20th, 1934, in a small clinic in Rome, Italy. Her mother, Romilda Villani, had dreams of being a famous actress, but life had other plans. Her father, Riccardo Ciccolone Murillo, was supposed to be an engineer, but he never really made much of himself. And worse, he refused to marry her mother, just left her to raise Sophia and her little sister Maria with no help, no money, nothing. It's hard to believe that someone as breathtaking as Sophia could grow up struggling, but that was her reality. She and her mother moved to Pozzuoli near Naples, living with her grandmother in a cramped, chaotic home. They barely had enough to get by. But even in poverty, her beauty stood out. People in the town used to whisper about the little girl with the striking eyes and perfect features. Some even called her the most beautiful girl they had ever seen. Her father, though? He wasn't interested. Sophia only met him 3 times in her life, once when she was 5, then at 17, and finally on his deathbed. She later said she forgave him, but that kind of abandonment? It leaves a mark. Even her sister, Maria, wasn't officially recognized by him, and here's the part that would make you cry. When Sophia became famous, she paid him just so Maria could legally have his last name. Imagine that. She also had 2 half-brothers from her father's side, but they were never really part of her life. It was just Sophia, Maria, and their mother doing whatever they could to survive. But even then, people knew Sophia was special. That face, that presence. She was born to be something bigger. And soon enough, the whole world would know it too. The Beauty Princess. By the time Sophia Loren was 15, her beauty was undeniable. She was already turning heads everywhere she went, so it was only natural that she'd enter a beauty pageant. Competing under the name Sophia Lazzaro, she stepped onto the stage of the 1950 Miss Italia contest, representing the Lazio region as candidate number Dusra. She competed her heart out, and when it was all said and done, she didn't take home the grand title. That went to Anna Maria Bugliari, but she didn't leave empty-handed either. She won Miss Elegance, a title that felt almost tailor-made for her. Sure, the judges saw plenty of beautiful girls that night, but there was something about Sophia that set her apart. It wasn't just her face, it was the way she carried herself, the confidence, the allure, the presence. Even at 15, she had the kind of magnetism that couldn't be taught. That moment was just the beginning. Sophia may not have won Miss Italia, but let's be real, none of the other contestants would go on to have her career. Little did anyone know that not only will this little girl be known for her wit and talent, but her beauty will transcend her and write her name in the sands of time. And as far as beauty pageantry was concerned, decades later in 2001, she returned to the pageant as the president of the jury, now a living legend sitting in the judge's seat. And in 2010, she was the one placing the crown on the winner's head. Full circle. The little girl from Pozzuoli, the one who grew up in poverty, the one whose beauty had once been overlooked by the father who abandoned her. She had become the standard of beauty. The world may not have known it back in 1950, but that pageant had just witnessed the rise of a woman who would define glamour for generations. From another world. Sophia Loren didn't just come from a different country, she came from a different world. You see, Hollywood had its symbols of men's desires. But let's face it, as far as American actresses were concerned, they still had to play by a certain set of rules. They could be hot, but not too hot. They could tease, but not cross the line. But in European cinema, where Sophia came from, It was a totally different story. Over there, sensuality wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was celebrated, embraced, expected. And Sophia came up in an industry where beauty and desire weren't just accessories to a character. They were the character. Before Hollywood tried to polish her into an international star, Sophia was already making waves in Italy. She was far from some innocent small-town girl who got discovered and transformed by a studio. She had already built a name for herself in a film industry that didn't shy away from raw sensuality. And let's just say, some of her early roles would have never made it past the American censors. Take Two Nights with Cleopatra in 1954, Sophia played the Egyptian queen, but even if the title sounds like some historical epic film, it was a lot more than that. It was a sultry, steamy film that barely bothered with accuracy and instead leaned all the way into seduction. She slinked around in revealing costumes, played scenes dripping with innuendo, and exuded a confidence that went far beyond anything American actresses were allowed to do at the time. It wasn't just the character that was seductive, it was her. Then there was The River Girl in 1955. In this film, she played a wild, untamed woman living by the water, always drenched, always smoldering, always tempting the men around her. For her, this wasn't just a role, it was her playing herself. The Italian directors knew this, so they didn't try to tone her down or fit her into a prim and proper mold. They let her be sensual, let her be commanding, let her take over the screen in ways that made even Hollywood's biggest bombshells look tame in comparison. And then there was Scandal in Sorrento in 1955, where she spent half the movie in a wet dress, making Marcello Mastroianni lose his mind with desire. These weren't films where censors implied, they practically dared the audience. And so with a star like Sophia before her Hollywood arrival, it is easy to see that she may as well have been from another world. When Hollywood finally got its hands on Sophia, they had a choice: try to tame her or let her be what she was. They opted for a mix. They gave her glamorous roles, dressed her in high fashion, and played up her elegance. But even in her most sophisticated performances, there was always that underlying fire, that rawness that no American studio could fully erase. That was the scandal factor, the thing that made her different from Monroe, from Mansfield, from Taylor. Sophia came from a place where sex appeal wasn't a performance. It was just part of who she was, and Hollywood, for all its rules, couldn't hide it. Wild and untamed. Sophia Loren was no doubt a great beauty to behold, but she was also more than that. She was the kind of woman who made men weak in the knees just by walking into a room. She had this raw, natural appeal that went beyond her looks, though those alone were enough to stop traffic. It was the way she carried herself, the confidence, the fire in her eyes, the way she spoke with that deep, sultry voice. She wasn't trying to be sexy, she just was. Back in the 50s and 60s, Hollywood loved its bombshells, but there was something different about Sophia. Marilyn Monroe had the playful, breathy innocence. Jane Mansfield was all about exaggerated curves and over-the-top flirtation. But Sophia? She had this earthy, almost dangerous kind of sensuality. She wasn't just eye candy, she was a woman who looked like she knew things that could drive a man crazy. Of course, in public, she played the part of the classy European actress. She was always elegant, always poised, always just the right amount of mysterious. But behind the scenes, the rumors painted a very different picture. People whispered about her love affairs, her appetite for passion, and how no man could ever seem to truly tame her. Hollywood executives were obsessed with her. They knew she was gold on screen, but off screen, she was unpredictable. She wasn't like the other actresses who played by the rules, smiled for the cameras, and did what they were told. Sophia had a mind of her own. Directors wanted to mold her, control her, shape her into whatever they thought an American audience wanted, but she wasn't having any of it. She was passionate, stubborn, and fiercely independent. Men fell at her feet, but she never seemed to be the one chasing them. It was always the other way around, and that's what made her even more desirable. Hollywood liked to think it could own its stars, but Sophia Loren, she belonged to no one. Men at her feet. Sophia Loren was the kind of woman men didn't just want, they needed her. She had this magnetic pull, like a flame that powerful men couldn't resist flying straight into. And once they got too close, they either burned up or got completely lost in her. And speaking of getting burned, Carlo Ponti was one of the first men to play with her fire and get burned. Sadly, as much as he tried, he couldn't keep up. For one, he was more than 20 years older, a powerful film producer who saw something in Sophia before the rest of the world did. He basically shaped her career, guided her rise to fame, and eventually became her husband. Beautiful love story, right? It would be, except that behind the scenes, people whispered that their relationship wasn't exactly fueled by passion, and there was actually no love between the two, especially not from Sophia. You see, Carlo was steady, reliable, and deeply in love with her, but Sophia was still young, still full of fire. Some said she had an appetite for excitement that Ponti, despite his influence and devotion, just couldn't satisfy. And if the rumors were to be believed, she didn't always ignore the temptation of other men, and one of the several men offering temptations was Cary Grant. Like Ponti, he was older too, but unlike Ponti, he had an effortless charm that made women swoon. And when he met Sophia on the set of Houseboat, it was like he had been struck by lightning. From the start, he was obsessed, sending her love letters, calling her constantly, practically begging her to leave Carlo and be with him. But Sophia wasn't as hooked on him as he was on her. Sure, she enjoyed the attention. Who wouldn't? It was Cary Grant. But she wasn't willing to throw her life away for a passionate fling, and in the end, that rejection stung. Grant never quite got over her. He wasn't the only one, though. The great Marlon Brando also wanted a piece of Sophia. If Cary Grant was all smooth words and old Hollywood charm, Brando was raw, brooding, animalistic. He had a reputation for taking what he wanted, and according to some whispers, what he wanted, at least for a while, was Sophia. Their alleged fling was all heat, no strings. Two of the most magnetic people in Hollywood, lost in a whirlwind of passion before moving on like nothing ever happened. It was never meant to last. Brando was too wild, and Sophia? She wasn't the type to be anyone's conquest. Then there was Richard Burton. At the time he wanted Sophia, he was already involved with Elizabeth Taylor, but that didn't stop people from speculating. Was there a rivalry? A secret affair? If Sophia and Burton ever had something, they kept it buried deep beneath the Hollywood gossip machine, but Taylor supposedly saw Loren as a threat. And if Elizabeth Taylor was jealous of you, that meant something. In the end, those were just the men people knew about. There were always stories, secret lovers, late-night rendezvous, passionate affairs hidden from the public eye. Some were just gossip, wild exaggerations from the press. But with Sophia Loren, you could never really tell where the truth ended and the fantasy began. The bisexual whispers. Did you know that in her time, a lot of people believed Sophia wasn't just irresistible to men? There were stories, quiet ones at first, then louder as the tabloids caught wind, that she had indulged in forbidden desires, slipping away into the night with some of Hollywood's most glamorous ladies. It's both insane and juicy when you think about it, and one of the most tantalizing rumors involved none other than Marlene Dietrich. If you know Dietrich and her persona, it would come as no surprise that someone like Sophia would become entangled with her. Dietrich was famously rebellious and daring, and to cap it all up, she was also known for her affairs with both men and women. She was powerful, dominant, a woman who could seduce with just a look, and according to some gossip, she had her sights set on Sophia. The story goes that Dietrich, much older but still oozing that intoxicating allure, took an interest in the young Italian beauty. Now, did anything happen? Well, no one really knows. But the idea of Sophia being swept up in Marlene's world of secret midnight affairs, whispered conversations, and forbidden rendezvous is too delicious not to imagine. But Dietrich was not the only woman Sophia got entangled with. There were also a lot of eyebrow raises about her friendship with Italian actress Silvana Mangano. The two were undeniably close. Too close, some claimed. Mangano, stunning in her own right, had a kind of cool, sophisticated beauty that contrasted with Sophia's smoldering sensuality. People talked, wondered, speculated. Were they just friends, or was there something more behind the scenes? Hollywood had seen plenty of close friendships that were anything but, and some believed Sophia and Silvana shared something deeper, something hidden from the cameras. And of course, there were the endless whispers about fleeting moments, run-ins with famous actresses, mysterious vacations with beautiful women, playful touches that lingered just a second too long. The tabloids, always hungry for scandal, printed anything they could get their hands on. Some stories were wild, exaggerated, full of creative flourishes. Others, maybe not so far from the truth. Sophia herself never confirmed any of it. If she had a taste for women, she took that secret to the grave. But the rumors never really went away. Maybe because people wanted them to be true, or maybe because, in the world of Hollywood, where passion burned behind every locked door, anything was possible. The bombshell rivalry. Hollywood was a battlefield for the beautiful, and when it came to Sophia Loren, there were plenty of women who either wanted to be her, outshine her, or take her down a notch. And would you blame them? She had this European mystery, this untamed fire that made her stand out from the classic Hollywood blondes. And as you might imagine, that didn't sit well with some of the other bombshells of the era. And so the rivalry began. One of the most infamous rivalries was with Jane Mansfield. Now, Jane was a whole different kind of symbol. She was loud, over the top, all curves and giggles, practically built for controversy. If Sophia was all about smoldering, effortless sensuality, Jane was about throwing it in your face. And the moment they were in the same room together, the tension was palpable. And this is not all just all talk. There was actually a famous incident that highlighted this bitter bombshell rivalry. It all went down at a dinner party where Jane accidentally exposed herself in front of the cameras while sitting next to Sophia. Now, make no mistake, this wasn't just some innocent wardrobe malfunction. Many believe Jane did it on purpose, a calculated move to steal the spotlight from the Italian goddess. And Sophia's reaction, caught forever in that now iconic photo, said everything. Her glare, her pursed lips. It was the look of a woman who knew she was being challenged. Some even claimed Sophia played it cool in public, but behind closed doors, she was furious. Jane was trying to one-up her, and Sophia didn't like being upstaged. Well, as dramatic as that was, Marilyn Monroe is another bombshell that allegedly hated Sophia's guts. By the late 50s, Marilyn was still the reigning symbol of men's desire, but here came Sophia, exotic, fresh, and oozing a sensuality that didn't require a breathy voice or a ditzy act. Hollywood loves a new queen, and some whispered that Marilyn felt threatened. Was Sophia seen as the woman who could dethrone her? The press certainly thought so. Now, there were no public feuds between them, but in an industry where power was measured by the number of heads you turned, there was definitely an unspoken competition. Sophia was younger, had a different kind of appeal, and didn't have the same personal struggles that Marilyn battled behind the scenes. As Marilyn's career began to waver, some say Sophia's rise made it even harder for her to hold on to her title as the ultimate fantasy woman. But what happens when two bombshells clash over a man? Well, this is exactly what went down between Sophia and Elizabeth Taylor. If Sophia had a rival who could match her in pure star power, it was Liz. Elizabeth was stunning, fiery, and just as confident in her ability to make men fall at her feet. The gossip magazines loved to pit them against each other, especially when it came to men. Richard Burton was one of the biggest points of speculation. He was wild, charismatic, and irresistible in that rough, dangerous way. Elizabeth had him, but was Sophia ever in the picture? Some rumors suggested Burton had a wandering eye and that he and Sophia had a flirtation, or maybe more. Whether it was true or not, Elizabeth supposedly wasn't a fan of Sophia, and if Liz didn't like you, you knew it. Hollywood thrived on competition, and when it came to beauty, seduction, and star power, Sophia wasn't just playing the game, she was winning. And if that meant stepping over a few other bombshells along the way, so be it. Nympho or free spirit? So here's the real question. Was Sophia Loren really this insatiable seductress, or was she just a woman who refused to be boxed in? What do you really think? We do know that Hollywood loves its labels. If a man is charming and has a string of lovers, he's a ladies' man. If a woman does the same, she's a nympho, a man-eater, a femme fatale. And Sophia. She was constantly caught in that trap. Her beauty was so overwhelming, her presence so magnetic, that people assumed she had to be this wild, untamed creature behind closed doors. But the truth? Well, it's a little more complicated. Yes, there were whispers about her so-called insatiable appetite, about how men fell at her feet, about how she was supposedly impossible to resist. But then, on the other hand, she had a rock-solid, decades-long marriage to Carlo Ponti. They weren't some Hollywood disaster couple burning out in a storm of scandals and affairs. They lasted. That's not exactly the behavior of a woman who couldn't be satisfied. So where did all the rumors come from? A lot of it was just classic Hollywood myth-making. The media saw this stunning, curvy Italian goddess and needed to turn her into a larger-than-life fantasy. Tabloids ran with every little whisper, every alleged affair, every suggestive glance. Did she have lovers? Maybe. But was she the ravenous, uncontrollable seductress that people painted her as? That's a different story. At the end of the day, maybe she wasn't a nympho at all. Maybe she was just a woman who knew what she wanted, who didn't let society's rules dictate how she lived, who embraced her beauty and power without shame. And for some people, especially in the rigid, male-dominated world of old Hollywood, that was scandalous enough.
One thing is true, the stars of the Golden Age knew how to have a good time. They were known for hosting some of the most famous parties of the era, with some of the top people in society in attendance. You could be sure to see all kinds of things at such parties, from overflowing booze to vices. While all of these are normal at parties, some of these Golden Age parties went too far and even made it into the news because of how scandalous they were. From the rumored orgies at Jane Mansfield's mansion to Fatty Arbuckle's deadly party, these 10 scandalous parties that took place in the Golden Age still shock people to this day. The Roaring Twenties Party. In the mid-1950s, America's power couple, Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds, decided to host a party in their backyard. But this was not just any party. It was one that got people talking for a while. A good number of Hollywood couples threw parties in their homes during the Golden Age, but Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds' 1955 party was said to be unforgettable. At the time, Eddie Fisher was known for his smooth and romantic chart-topping hits, while Debbie Reynolds, who was clearly smitten by the singer, was making waves as an actress. They both were at the peak of their careers in the 50s, and they were determined to keep working towards their goals. But every now and then, the couple loved to unwind and have fun by partying. Achieving such great things and getting famous in their 20s left them feeling fulfilled, and what better way to celebrate than to organize a party-themed Roaring Twenties. They wanted to enjoy their youth along with friends, and that was exactly what they did. They decided to transform their garage into a playroom as they set out to host one of the most exclusive parties in town. They invited some young stars like Tab Hunter, the poster boy for Teenage Dreams, and Leon Tyre, the charming actor. When the party began, everything seemed innocent, and the atmosphere was electric with the promise of a night to remember. But soon enough, it became obvious that this was not a regular party. It was a party where seemingly innocent young stars came ready to unleash their wild side. The party gave them permission to shed their public personas and reveal a wild side hidden from the prying eyes of the paparazzi. It was said that the party was not one for innocent eyes, as subtle glances turned into lingering touches, and the stars allegedly consumed all kinds of substances. From the pictures that circulated after the party, one could see that they all let loose and partied with reckless abandon. Most of the stars there were busy exploring their raw, untamed passion, and no one was left out of the fun. Only the people who attended the party truly know what happened that night, but rumors circulated that it was a bit too wild. No one expected it to turn out that way, especially because Debbie Reynolds and Eddie were known to have a wholesome image. MGM's Dark 1937 Party. The MGM's Grand Party in 1937 was an event that a lot of people enjoyed, but for one actress, Patricia Douglas, it turned into a night she desperately wanted to erase. According to reports, The party was organized in Los Angeles in honor of MGM's top salesman. There were already rumors about the strange things that the top men in the studio did behind closed doors, but not many people knew the extent of it. Before the party began, the studio brought the salesman in by train from different parts of the country, and it looked like it was going to be the most glamorous party of the year. The event was extravagant, with star-studded meet and greets, marching bands to lead the way, and even a fleet of motorcycle cops providing a grand entrance. There was a private rail car, brimming with promise, booze, and lively conversations. To commence the ceremony, which was to take place at the famous Ambassador Hotel, MGM's Louis B. Mayer stepped on stage and gave a speech. But it was after the ceremony that the convention's grandeur took a dark twist. The centerpiece was a lavish party with the comedic brilliance of Laurel and Hardy and the mesmerizing Dandridge sisters. And there was an open bar, ensuring that spirits were as high as the Hollywood Hills. Yet, amid all the dazzle, Patricia Douglas, a dancer and movie extra, found herself in a nightmarish situation. She was one of 120 young women told they were destined for an on-location film shoot that evening. However, once they arrived, they realized they were trapped in an event with a sinister underbelly. It was said that the party was not a normal party, but a stag party. Several strange acts were rumored to have taken place on that night, but one of the most shocking was what happened to the young actress Patricia Douglas. As the night wore on, Douglas, amid the glitz and glamour, was allegedly targeted by a drunken salesman who not only forced her to consume alcohol, but also took alleged advantage of her. Never in her lifetime would she have thought that someone would do such a thing to her. She was devastated and shocked, but Patricia was not one to stay silent. She raised her voice and spoke out about what happened to her. She explained every detail, hoping to get justice. Unfortunately, the court was not exactly in her favor, not because she was lying, but because MGM allegedly made the story disappear. MGM didn't want the world to know that one of their best salesmen took advantage of an underage girl at a party they organized. This kind of scandal would have tarnished the image of the studio forever, so they used their influence to make the scandal disappear. Jayne Mansfield's Wild Mansion Party. Mansfield was a Hollywood star who defined the word wild. She was known for her fearless embrace of sensuality and glamour. Her figure-hugging outfits, her trademark blonde bombshell hair, and her smile were the weapons in her arsenal. She made sure the cameras loved her, and they sure did. But the wildness didn't stop at her looks. Jayne was a party animal, and her Hollywood Hills mansion was the backdrop for some of the wildest soirees that ever graced the hills. If you want to have an idea of what her parties looked like, picture a mansion in the Hollywood Hills with the stars twinkling overhead and the poolside lit up like a movie set. This was the setting for one of Jayne Mansfield's notorious house parties, a place where the word excess took on a whole new meaning. Excessive drinking, late-night revelry, and perhaps more were part of the package. There are rumors that these soirees weren't just about clinking glasses and polite chit-chat. The night would often take on a more uninhibited vibe, with guests participating in some, let's say, risque activities. There were rumors that her guests got involved in orgies during these parties. Some people even said she taped these acts for her guests. Yet it wasn't just about the parties. Jayne Mansfield was also known for her infamous affairs with some of the biggest names of the time, including Robert Kennedy and his brother John F. Kennedy. And it's safe to say that both Kennedys seemed to have a thing for the blonde bombshell. What happened behind the closed doors of Jayne Mansfield's house remains veiled in the allure of an era when stars lived larger than life. The Las Vegas Wild Party. Although the stars of old Hollywood partied a lot, these parties were mostly private and exclusive. Most times, only the stars in attendance witnessed firsthand what really happened in these parties. However, some of these parties made it to the tabloids because of the rumors that circulated about them. One of these parties was a 1950 Las Vegas party that played host to Montgomery Clift and an array of luminaries. On this particular night, a lavish party was about to unfold within the hallowed walls of a nightclub. The club was said to have imported several Hollywood stars for the party, which started off as a banquet. As the clock struck midnight, a parade of Hollywood's most illustrious names descended upon the club. Among the stars, the charismatic Daisy Arnaz, the enchanting Lucille Ball, and the alluring Marlene Dietrich took center stage. The party started with a fancy dinner, but as the hours ticked by, things got wild. Photographs captured by the flashbulbs of the era's paparazzi showed a glimpse of the spectacle unfolding behind the club's closed doors. Rows of champagne glasses glistened in the dimly lit room, and laughter and chatter filled the air. But it was what remained hidden from those photos that ignited the most scandalous rumors. While it looked like the party was a casual get-together, these Hollywood stars wanted to do more than just meeting and sipping champagne. They wanted to let loose and do things that they would never be caught doing in public. Behind the scenes, there was a lot going on. Rumors started to spread about this party. People said there was lots of drinking and even some drug use. Even the stars that were known to be reserved and laid back unleashed another side. The club made room for these Hollywood stars to do whatever they wanted. There were no restrictions, but they did all these with the understanding that whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. From every indication, the party turned into something wilder than anyone expected. The stars, known for their perfect public images, took off their masks, let loose, and did things that were a bit scandalous. Errol Flynn's weird parties. Because of how wild and wayward Errol Flynn was as a child, his own mother had a hard time coping with him. As a result of this, their relationship was rocky, and she even referred to him as the devil for some weird reason. Interestingly, Errol grew up to become an adventurous man who did not live by the rules, and he became a party animal too. While his career was thriving, the actor was hosting all kinds of parties in his mansion, and most of these parties were scandalous. Almost every week, he came together with the likes of Clark Gable, David Niven, and Olivia de Havilland to party. It was alleged that some of these stars even enjoyed watching the wild animals at the back of Flynn's house. It was said that his mansion was a sprawling Spanish-style abode with hidden alcoves and secret passageways. It's the perfect setting for a night of revelry. Now it's said that the drinks flowed freely at Flynn's parties, and it wasn't just your run-of-the-mill cocktails. We're talking about top-shelf liquor and champagne that never seemed to run out. The laughter and the clinking of glasses were only rivaled by the sound of jazz music filling the air. As the night went on, the parties took on a life of their own. Flynn, known for his charm and charisma, was at the center of it all, regaling guests with stories of his adventures. But it wasn't just about conversation. His parties were rumored to have been wild, with guests dancing with abandon and whispers of romantic escapades in hidden corners of the mansion. But it was said that most of the guests who attended his parties preferred not to talk about what happened behind closed doors. It was almost like he turned his house into a place where his co-stars came and did wild things they wouldn't dare to do on camera. Hedda Hopper's unforgettable birthday bash. You've probably heard of some wild Hollywood parties, but this one was next level. Hedda Hopper was a prominent American gossip columnist and actress known for her influential role in the world of Hollywood journalism. The star-studded guest list read the likes of Judy Garland and Clark Gable, two icons in their own right, walking through the door. You can imagine the paparazzi bulbs popping like crazy, capturing every moment of what was shaping up to be a legendary night. The setting was as lavish as they come. We're talking about decorations that could rival the grandeur of a blockbuster film set. The champagne was excess, and there was an air of decadence hanging heavy in the room. However, the party wasn't just about mingling and sipping bubbly. It was rumored that the drinks were more than just cocktails. They were a one-way ticket to the wildest stories you'd ever hear. The excessive drinking was almost a given, and the night seemed to unravel into one for the Hollywood history books. The details of what exactly went down have been hushed over the years, reminding us that sometimes what happens in Hollywood stays tantalizingly behind closed doors. Joan Crawford's 1951 party. Let's step back in time to 1951, when the glamour of Hollywood was in full swing. A party to remember was in the works, and the star of the show, none other than Joan Crawford herself. The party took place at Stork Club, New York, but it was not your regular party. The Stork Club in Hollywood is a name that resonates with late-night revelry and the kind of extravagance that only old Hollywood could conjure. This was the place where Frank Sinatra crooned, Marilyn Monroe dazzled, and Humphrey Bogart owned the night. But that fateful night, Joan Crawford was the star of the night. Joan Crawford was known for being one of the most prominent and versatile actresses in the golden age of Hollywood. She was celebrated for her remarkable career, spanning several decades, and was renowned for her roles in films like Mildred Pierce, Possessed, and The Woman. The actress was also said to be a free spirit. When it came to partying, she did whatever she pleased. So on that starry night, Joan Crawford arrived at the Stork Club in grand style, ready to let loose and paint the town red. Rumor had it that the party took a wild turn. The party may have looked like an innocent gathering on the surface, but it was nothing close to innocent behind closed doors. After the party, photographs from the party began to circulate like wildfire and showcased Joan, the epitome of Hollywood elegance, letting her hair down, indulging in vices, and having the time of her life. It was a party where some glamorous stars had their moments of wild abandon. Sophia Loren's Los Angeles party. It was the year 1957, and Sophia Loren was throwing a party that was about to go down in Hollywood's history. If you've ever seen that iconic snapshot of Sophia eyeing Jane Mansfield's daring cleavage, well, that's just a sneak peek of what was in store that fateful night. The Paramount Pictures lot was buzzing with anticipation, all for the lady of the hour, Sophia Loren. You see, this wasn't your average soiree. This was an ode to glamour, star power, and a touch of wildness. Hollywood bombshells and the creme de la creme of Tinseltown's leading men were in attendance. The guest list read like a Hollywood Walk of Fame. But it wasn't just the people in attendance that caught people's attention. It was the things that they indulged in. If there was a queen of wild parties, it would be her. And guess what? She was there, right by Sophia's side. You just knew this night was about to take a walk on the wild side. The pictures from the party showed that Jane Mansfield had let go completely and was ready to have a good time. Behind those closed doors, things were heating up. People indulged in vices, puffing on cigarettes and sipping cocktails like there was no tomorrow. The air was thick with laughter, secrets, and that unmistakable Hollywood magic. People whispered about clandestine affairs, hidden rendezvous, and wild antics that made this party legendary. The truth is, it played out just like any other wild Hollywood soiree, excess, indulgence, and stories to tell for years to come. Sophia Loren's 1957 party was a night to remember, or maybe one to forget, depending on how much you indulged. The Wild Garden of Allah party. The Garden of Allah was a grand stage for Hollywood's wildest rendezvous in the 1920s and 30s. This wasn't just a hotel, it was a swirling maelstrom of glamour, gin, and gossip. The things that happened in this hotel would shock anyone who wasn't part of Hollywood's elite. Imagine stepping through the hotel's grand entrance, the faint strains of jazz dancing in the air. The lobby, adorned with Art Deco splendor, was calm before the storm. Once you entered the heart of the hotel, the real revelry began. This was the place where the likes of Errol Flynn partied. Excessive drinking was practically a Garden of Allah ritual. The bartender, a maestro of mixology, concocted cocktails that could make Hemingway blush. As the night aged, so did inhibitions. The stars, whether Fitzgerald with his novels or Flynn with his swashbuckling charm, were no strangers to the allure of a well-filled glass. But it wasn't just the booze that flowed there. It was secrets and scandals, too. You'd find affairs blooming amidst the potted palms, trysts concealed behind heavy velvet curtains. Stars whispered sweet promises under dim chandeliers, knowing full well that the dawn would uncover their transgressions. Gossip flowed through the garden like the wine in their glasses. In 1930, a notorious party at the Garden had F. Scott Fitzgerald at the center of a fiery altercation. He reportedly threw a champagne glass at his wife Zelda during a heated argument. The party didn't just end in a whisper, it made headlines across the nation. These parties were wild. The Garden of Allah was a melting pot of vice and virtue, an incubator for scandal and salacious stories. Imagine, in the 1920s and 30s, the world was emerging from the constraints of prohibition, and Hollywood had a thirst to quench. If you'd attended, you'd be swept into a tempest of cocktails and carousing, where the laughter was raucous, the music was intoxicating, and the shadows concealed more than you could imagine. It was a place where stars shone brightest and fell hardest, where Hollywood's secrets and sins were laid bare under the California stars. These parties were a whirlwind of decadence and debauchery, where the only rule was to indulge in every whim. The excesses of the Marion Davies Beach House. On the sun-kissed shores of Santa Monica in the 1920s, that's where you'd find the exclusive world of Marion Davies Beach House bashes, where the newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst and his mesmerizing mistress Marion Davies played host to extravagant gatherings that redefined the very essence of opulence. It was in this very house that a Hollywood star almost got shot. The scene was set against the backdrop of the Pacific Ocean, where golden sands met the blue horizon. The likes of Charlie Chaplin, the silent film maestro, and Greta Garbo, the enigmatic siren, were said to have partied there. However, chaos wasn't just a stranger, it was an unwelcome guest at these parties. The very extravagance that made these parties legendary also made them vulnerable to spiraling into mayhem. It wasn't unusual for the evening to end in a storm of shouting, shoving, and sometimes even broken glasses. For example, a notorious incident took place in 1924 when Hearst, known for his temper, allegedly pulled a gun on fellow guest Charlie Chaplin during an argument. It was the sort of drama that would give tabloids enough material to fuel their presses for weeks. If you were to attend such parties, you'd be a witness to history, a participant in the surreal world where excess was an art form. You'd see stars of the silver screen at the pinnacle of their fame, dressed in their finest, yet sometimes descending into the depths of chaos. You'd see the allure of Hollywood, but also the dark side of indulgence. These beach house bashes weren't just parties, they were a representation of the things that happened when Hollywood stars came together and decided to indulge in whatever they wanted to do. When the cameras were not present, these beach house bashes were a source of escape from the pressures of fame. These parties, as crazy as they seemed, were like a scene from Judy Garland's life. Some old Hollywood stars were involved in shocking things that would leave the mouths of their fans open in awe. From being involved with the mafia to being a secret lesbian, some of these stars' double lives were far from ideal. Elizabeth Scott, the secret lesbian. Born Emma Matzo, Scott's journey to Hollywood stardom began in the 1950s when the film industry decided to turn her into a glamorous icon. With a new American name and training in acting, dressing, and demeanor, all that was left was to change her name, and that was how the name Elizabeth Scott came about. On top of that, Paramount crafted a fake biography for her and always described her as beautiful, blonde, aloof, and alluring in press releases. They eventually molded her into a tough femme fatale, branding her as the Threat. Critics generally praised her performances, and she starred alongside some of Hollywood's leading men. However, things began to go south for Scott when gossip columns often noted her lack of a steady boyfriend and that none of her co-stars seriously dated her, which was unusual for the time when romantic flings between leading men and their co-stars were common, even if they were just for publicity. Scott, however, stayed out of those staged romances. It appeared odd, and so the media began to dig deeper. Scott worked steadily, though she faced stiff competition from Veronica Lake and Lauren Bacall, who also played tough, dangerous roles. She understood her place in Hollywood, beautiful but not as stunning as Lake, and talented but not quite as skilled as Bacall. She invested her money wisely, but her career faced a different kind of threat. As it turned out, she was a lesbian. While many male stars of the golden age of Hollywood were also gay, they often faced threats from studios but could find some solace in a discreet underground gay culture. Lesbians, however, were not so fortunate. They had to stay deeply in the closet, and the threats against them were severe. Some, like silent film star Alla Nazimova, manipulated young actresses through promises of career help, taking advantage of them regardless of their sexual orientation. Elizabeth Scott, however, had too much integrity to exploit other women. She often traveled to Paris, where there was more acceptance of her lifestyle, and even began dating Fried, an openly gay Parisian entertainer, but as far as Hollywood was concerned, she hid her real sexuality, keeping it a secret. The studio, however, didn't like her choice to date an openly gay person.
If the news got back to America, it could end her career. But in the 40s and 50s, Americans got little news from Europe unless it was about the Cold War. So as long as Elizabeth Scott's secret life stayed in Paris, the studio allowed it. But whenever Scott returned to America, she would always seek comfort in the arms of high-class call girls who were lesbians also, because they were presumed to be discreet. This, she would soon find out, would be the biggest mistake she'd ever made. What she didn't know was that, sadly, many of Hollywood's top call girls had a second income source, selling stories to tabloids. Some even engaged in blackmail, but that's a different tale. In this day and age, there are stricter rules and laws guiding how papers and tabloids get their stories, but back in the 50s, papers would go to extreme lengths for a story. Even those who remember the National Enquirer's antics in the 80s, like destroying presidential candidate Gary Hart or sneaking reporters with mini-cameras into celebrity funerals, can't imagine the ruthlessness of 50s tabloids. The most ruthless paper in this regard was called Confidential. Publisher Robert Harrison made modern TV and web gossip look amateurish. His operations rivaled those of the FBI and the CIA. Confidential ruined enough lives to fill several books, and they had their sights on Scott due to her disinterest in men. For a while, they lacked enough dirt, but in 1954, they bought the address books of several popular Hollywood prostitutes. The magazine was ecstatic. An actor's name, address, and phone number in a call girl's little black book was enough to imply scandal. They disgraced male clients readily, but reserved special luridness for lesbians, given the magazine's male ownership. Scott became a target of insinuating articles. They couldn't push too far, though, since all they had was her name in the book. Still, Confidential kept digging. Eventually, they found a prostitute Scott trusted and liked, who had never sold information before. Tragically, this call girl recorded everything, and just like that, her double life was revealed to the whole world. John Garfield, The Dance of Communism. John Garfield, born Jacob Julius Garfinkel on March 4, 1913, in New York City, was one of Hollywood's most compelling actors, known for his rugged, everyman persona. His journey to stardom was marked by perseverance and talent, rising from humble beginnings to become a significant figure in American cinema. However, beneath his on-screen heroics and public persona, Garfield's life was marred by allegations of communist affiliations and rumored connections to the criminal underworld. Garfield's early life was challenging, growing up in the tough neighborhoods of New York's Lower East Side. His father struggled to provide for the family, and his mother passed away when he was just 7 years old. These hardships fostered resilience and determination in young Garfield, who found solace in acting. He honed his craft at the American Laboratory Theater and later joined the Group Theater, where he developed his distinctive naturalistic acting style. Garfield's breakthrough in Hollywood came with his performance in the 1938 film Four Daughters, which earned him his first Academy Award nomination. He quickly became known for his intense, brooding characters in films like The Postman Always Rings Twice, Body and Soul, and Force of Evil. His portrayals resonated with audiences, who saw in him a reflection of their own struggles and aspirations. Despite his success, Garfield's career and life took a dark turn in the late 1940s and early 1950s. During this period, America was gripped by the Red Scare, a widespread fear of communist influence in the country. Hollywood was a target. Many actors, writers, and directors were accused of communist sympathies. They were blacklisted from the industry. Garfield, known for his left-leaning political views and involvement in progressive causes, found himself under suspicion. In 1951, Garfield was subpoenaed to appear before the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, which was investigating communist infiltration in Hollywood. Garfield staunchly denied any communist affiliations and refused to name names, maintaining his integrity even under immense pressure. However, his refusal to cooperate with HUAC led to his blacklisting, effectively ending his career in major studio films. Adding to his troubles, Garfield was rumored to have connections to the criminal underworld. While much of this remains speculative, it's believed that his upbringing in the rough neighborhoods of New York and his association with certain figures in the entertainment industry brought him into contact with organized crime. These rumors, combined with his blacklisting, painted a contradictory picture of a man caught between his principles and the harsh realities of his time. Garfield's health began to deteriorate under the strain of these pressures. He suffered from a heart condition, exacerbated by the stress of being blacklisted and ostracized by the industry he loved. On May 21, 1952, at the age of 39, Garfield died of a heart attack. His death was a tragic end to a career and life that had promised so much. Rory Calhoun, the human sacrifice. Rory Calhoun was a minor but reliable movie actor whose career was handled delicately by the studios. Born Francis Timothy McCown, he endured a rough childhood marked by abuse. Dropping out of school, he fell into a life of crime and eventually went to prison for armed robbery. In 1943, at the age of 21, Calhoun's criminal activities caught up with him in a big way. He was arrested for breaking into a store and sentenced to 3 years in prison at the United States Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. This prison stint marked a turning point in his life. While serving time, he decided to reform and change the trajectory of his future. Upon his release, Calhoun took on a series of odd jobs, including working as a lumberjack and a cowhand. His rugged looks and physique eventually caught the attention of Hollywood talent agent Henry Wilson, who saw potential in the ex-convict. Wilson, who was known for transforming the images of his clients, suggested that McCown change his name to Rory Calhoun to help distance himself from his troubled past. Calhoun's criminal history was a closely guarded secret, especially as he began to find success in Hollywood. He made his film debut in 1944 and quickly rose to fame with roles in westerns and adventure films. Calhoun worked diligently to keep his past hidden, fearing that the revelation of his criminal activities would ruin his burgeoning career. Bugsy Siegel, producer by day, gangster by night. Bugsy Siegel, born Benjamin Siegel on February 28, 1906, in Brooklyn, New York, emerged as one of the most notorious gangsters in American history. His life was a fascinating blend of ruthless criminal activities and glamorous Hollywood aspirations, a juxtaposition that made his story all the more compelling. Growing up in the gritty streets of Brooklyn, Siegel quickly succumbed to a life of crime. By his teenage years, he had earned a fearsome reputation as an enforcer deeply involved in bootlegging, gambling, and murder. He co-founded the infamous Murder Inc., a group of contract killers that executed hits for the mob. Siegel's propensity for violence was legendary, earning him the nickname Bugsy, a moniker that alluded to his volatile and erratic nature. In the 1930s, seeking new opportunities and perhaps a bit of spark, Siegel moved to California. Here, he endeavored to expand his criminal empire while simultaneously attempting to break into the Hollywood scene. Los Angeles in the 1930s and 1940s was a playground for the rich and famous, a city where dreams were made and broken. Siegel, with his undeniable charisma and sharp sense of style, quickly found himself mingling with the stars. He attended high-profile parties and forged relationships with some of the biggest names in Hollywood, many of whom were blissfully unaware of the extent of his violent background. Siegel's charm and ambition led him to dream of becoming a movie producer. He invested in several films and tried to leverage his connections to gain a foothold in the industry. However, despite his efforts, his ventures into film production were met with limited success. Hollywood could not entirely shield him from his darker dealings. His friendships with celebrities were often superficial, as few truly understood the depths of his criminal activities. Despite the facade, Siegel's life remained steeped in danger and crime. He was instrumental in the development of the Las Vegas Strip, envisioning it as a gambling mecca that would cater to the wealthy elite. His project, the Flamingo Hotel, was an ambitious and costly venture that he hoped would secure his place in both the criminal underworld and American business history. Yet the project was plagued by delays and financial mismanagement, leading to tension with his mob associates. In the end, his violent criminal background contrasted with his Hollywood aspirations, ultimately leading to his downfall. His lavish spending and the mounting costs of the Flamingo project drew the wrath of his mob partners. On June 20th, 1947, Siegel's double life came to a brutal end when he was shot and killed in his Beverly Hills home. Barbara Stanwyck, the alleged spy. Barbara Stanwyck, born Ruby Catherine Stevens on July 16, 1907 in Brooklyn, New York, is remembered as one of Hollywood's most versatile and powerful actresses. Her on-screen presence was formidable, and she carved out a legendary career in film and television. However, beneath the polished exterior of this beloved star lay a life entangled with underworld figures and covert activities, particularly during the tumultuous era of the Red Scare. Stanwyck's rise to stardom was marked by resilience and determination. She began her career in the entertainment industry as a chorus girl before transitioning to acting. Her breakthrough came in the 1930s, and she quickly became known for her roles in films such as Stella Dallas, Double Indemnity, and Christmas in Connecticut. Her performances were characterized by a blend of strength, vulnerability, and an undeniable magnetism that captivated audiences. Despite her success, Stanwyck's personal life was far from serene. She had a series of rocky relationships and marriages, most notably with actor Robert Taylor. The couple's union was often described as a marriage of convenience, orchestrated more for Hollywood publicity than genuine affection. It was during this time that Stanwyck's connections to underworld figures began to surface. Rumors of Stanwyck's associations with the mob circulated within Hollywood circles. She was said to have formed friendships with notorious gangsters who were drawn to her tough, no-nonsense persona. These relationships reportedly protected her. They also gave her power. This was unusual for women in the industry at that time. Some speculated that her ties to the underworld provided her with leverage and security in an industry rife with exploitation and power struggles. The Red Scare of the 1940s and 1950s was even more dramatic in Stanwyck's life. This period, marked by intense anti-communist sentiment and widespread fear of subversion, saw many in Hollywood accused of communist sympathies and blacklisted. Stanwyck, known for her staunch anti-communist views, became an active participant in the industry's efforts to root out alleged communists. However, her involvement in these activities was a bit deeper than she let on. Publicly, she was a vocal supporter of anti-communist organizations, including the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, MPA, a group of conservative Hollywood figures who worked closely with the House Un-American Activities Committee, CHUAC, to identify and denounce suspected communists within the industry. But behind the scenes, according to rumors, Stanwyck's actions were secretly more covert. She was rumored to have engaged in secret activities, providing information on colleagues and participating in covert operations aimed at exposing and undermining communist influences in Hollywood. Her staunch anti-communist stance and willingness to collaborate with authorities earned her both admiration and animosity among her peers. Dorothy Kilgallen, the JFK investigator. Dorothy Kilgallen was a renowned journalist, television personality, and investigative reporter whose career spanned from the 1930s until her untimely death in 1965. Born on July 3, 1913, in Chicago, Illinois, Kilgallen grew up in a family deeply rooted in journalism. Her father, James Kilgallen, was a respected reporter, and it was through his influence that Dorothy developed a passion for news and storytelling. Kilgallen's career took off in the 1930s when she began writing a widely read column, The Voice of Broadway, for the New York Journal-American. Her column covered a mix of celebrity gossip, social commentary, and hard news, and it became immensely popular. She had a sharp wit and an eye for detail, which made her a standout in the competitive world of journalism. In addition to her column, Kilgallen was a regular panelist on the popular television quiz show What's My Line, which brought her further fame and recognition. However, it was Kilgallen's work as an investigative journalist that truly set her apart. Her most controversial and dangerous assignment came in the early 1960s, when she began investigating the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Kilgallen was deeply skeptical of the official account provided by the Warren Commission, which concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in the assassination. She believed there was more to the story and was determined to uncover the truth. Kilgallen's investigation into the JFK assassination was both extensive and perilous. She conducted numerous interviews, gathered confidential information, and meticulously analyzed the evidence. Her efforts led her to Jack Ruby, the nightclub owner who famously killed Oswald. Kilgallen was one of the few journalists to interview Ruby while he was in custody, and she reportedly obtained significant information that contradicted the official narrative. As she delved deeper into the assassination in a bid to get to the bottom of things, Kilgallen reportedly veered off the moral highway and began engaging some dangerous individuals while acting like she was being straight and narrow. These included underworld figures and people with potential ties to the intelligence community. On one hand, she seemed to be getting good information, but on the other, her pursuit of the truth placed her in precarious situations as she navigated a web of secrecy, conspiracy, and potential threats to her safety. In November 1965, Kilgallen was found lifeless in her Manhattan townhouse under mysterious circumstances. She was discovered in her bedroom, dressed in a nightgown, sitting upright in bed with reading material nearby. The official cause of death was listed as an overdose of alcohol and barbiturates, but the peculiar details surrounding her death fueled speculation and suspicion. Several aspects of Kilgallen's death raised questions. First, her autopsy revealed a combination of drugs in her system that she was not known to abuse. Additionally, the placement of her body and the presence of makeup suggested she had been moved or staged post-mortem. Most troubling was the fact that the notes and manuscript she had been working on, related to her JFK investigation, were missing and never recovered. These anomalies led many to believe that Kilgallen's death was not accidental, but rather the result of foul play. It was speculated that she was silenced because of the sensitive information she had uncovered about the Kennedy assassination. Moe Howard, drowning in debt. He was the leader of the beloved comedy trio The Three Stooges and was known for his humor and iconic bowl haircut. On screen, he entertained millions with his antics. He became a household name alongside Larry and Curly. Moses Harry Horwitz, better known as Moe Howard, was born on June 19, 1897, in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Bensonhurst, New York. He was the fourth of 5 sons born to Jenny Gorovitz and Solomon Horwitz, a family of Lithuanian Jewish descent. While his parents and brothers Benjamin, Jack, and Irving did not venture into show business, Moe, along with his older brother Shemp Howard, Samuel, and younger brother Curly Howard, Jerome, became iconic members of the Three Stooges. As a child, Moe was called Moe, but later preferred the name Harry. He had a great love for reading, particularly enjoying Horatio Alger books. His older brother Jack remembered, "I had many Horatio Alger books, and it was Moe's greatest pleasure to read them. They started his imaginative mind working and gave him ideas by the dozen. I think they were instrumental in putting thoughts into his head to become a person of good character and success." This early passion for reading and learning helped Moe immensely in his acting career, enabling him to quickly and easily memorize his lines. But even after he became famous and successful, something dark lurked in the shadows of his life. Beneath the comedic facade, Moe was rumored to have led a life fraught with financial struggles and hidden dealings that contrasted sharply with his public persona. To cope with these financial pressures, Moe was rumored to have turned to gambling, a habit that quickly spiraled out of control. Heavy gambling left Moe with big debts. It forced him to seek out questionable associates to manage his money troubles. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, had a secret love child. Ingrid Bergman was exiled from America, and Charlie Chaplin narrowly escaped statutory rape charges. These aren't movie plots. They're the real-life scandals that rocked Tinseltown's golden age. Clark Gable and Loretta Young. 1935 marked a turning point in Hollywood history. Clark Gable, 34, and Loretta Young, 22, were cast in The Call of the Wild. Gable, married to Maria Langham since 1931, was MGM's biggest star. Young, a devout Catholic, had already appeared in over 40 films. Filming began in Mount Baker, Washington in January. The remote location provided ample opportunity for the pair to grow close. Co-star Jack Oakey later remarked, "We all knew, but nobody talked about it." Their affair continued throughout production. By March, rumors circulated among the crew. Studio publicists worked overtime to keep gossip out of the press. When filming wrapped, Young discovered she was pregnant. MGM executives panicked. A scandal could ruin Gable's career and tarnish Young's image. The studio sent Young on a vacation to England. She returned to California and secretly gave birth to a daughter, Judy, on November 6, 1935. Young devised an elaborate adoption scheme. She announced to the press she'd adopted a child. In reality, Judy was her biological daughter. The deception worked. Hollywood bought the story. For 19 months, Young kept Judy hidden from nurses. In 1937, she publicly adopted her own daughter. The press praised her charitable act. Meanwhile, Gable kept his distance, visiting only occasionally. Judy grew up unaware of her true parentage. Young raised her as a single mother, fiercely protecting the secret. In 1950, Young married Tom Lewis, who never knew the truth about Judy's father. Years passed. Gable died in 1960, never publicly acknowledging Judy. In 1966, at age 31, Judy confronted Young about persistent rumors. Young finally confessed. Judy later recalled the emotional moment. She was trembling and crying. She said, "Yes, Clark Gable was your father." The truth remained private until 2000. In her posthumous autobiography, Young broke her silence. She wrote, "I did a lot of pretending as a child. I didn't lie, but I would pretend." In 2015, Young's daughter-in-law, Linda Lewis, revealed another layer to the story. She claimed Young had confided that Gable had date-raped her. This allegation added a darker dimension to the long-hidden affair, further complicating its legacy. Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. 1941 marked the beginning of one of Hollywood's most enduring love affairs. Spencer Tracy, 41, met Katharine Hepburn, 34, on the set of Woman of the Year. Tracy, a devout Catholic, had been married to Louise Treadwell since 1923. Their first encounter was unremarkable. Hepburn, known for her sharp wit, greeted Tracy. "I'm afraid I'm too tall for you, Mr. Tracy." He retorted, "Don't worry, I'll cut you down to size." As filming progressed, their chemistry became apparent. Co-star Roscoe Carnes observed, "They were halfway in love before they knew it." By the end of production, Tracy and Hepburn were inseparable. Their relationship posed a challenge for MGM. Tracy's Catholic faith prevented divorce. The studio worked to keep the affair out of the press. Meanwhile, Hepburn put her career second to Tracy's. 1945 saw the release of Without Love, their third film together. The public's fascination grew. Gossip columnist Luella Parsons wrote, "Hollywood's worst-kept secret is the Tracy-Hepburn romance." Tracy struggled with alcoholism throughout their relationship. Hepburn often nursed him through bouts of depression and heavy drinking. She later said, "I honestly don't know what I would have done without him." Their affair continued for decades, spanning 9 films together. They never lived together officially, but Hepburn was a constant presence in Tracy's life. She even took time off from her career to care for him in his later years. In 1967, Tracy and Hepburn filmed their final movie, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Tracy was in poor health. He died 17 days after filming Wrapped. Hepburn didn't attend the funeral out of respect for Tracy's wife. Louise Tracy never publicly acknowledged the affair. She told a friend, "I know what's going on between Spencer and Miss Hepburn, but I'm Mrs. Spencer Tracy, and no one can change that." Hepburn didn't speak publicly about their relationship until after Louise's death in 1983. In her 1991 autobiography, she wrote, "I loved Spencer Tracy. I would have done anything for him." Ingrid Bergman and Roberto Rossellini. 1949 saw Hollywood's sweetheart Ingrid Bergman at the height of her fame. The 34-year-old Swedish actress was married to Dr. Petter Lindstrom and had a 10-year-old daughter. Her image was one of purity and grace. Bergman's life changed when she wrote a letter to Italian director Roberto Rossellini. She admired his work and expressed interest in making a film together. Rossellini, 43, was married to Marcella de Marchi. Their collaboration began with Stromboli in 1949. Filming on the remote Italian island created the perfect environment for romance. By the end of production, Bergman was pregnant with Rossellini's child. News of the affair broke in February 1950. The public reaction was swift and harsh. Senator Edwin C. Johnson of Colorado denounced Bergman on the Senate floor as a powerful influence for evil. Bergman gave birth to her son Renato on February 2, 1950. She divorced Lindstrom and married Rossellini on May 24, 1950. The scandal resulted in her effective exile from Hollywood. American theaters boycotted Bergman's films. Stromboli flopped at the box office. Bergman later reflected, "I've gone from saint to whore and back to saint again, all in one lifetime." The couple had twin daughters, Isabella and Isota, in 1952. They made several films together, but none achieved commercial success in the U.S. Bergman's career in Europe flourished, however. 1956 marked Bergman's cautious return to Hollywood with Anastasia. She won her second Oscar but didn't attend the ceremony. Cary Grant accepted on her behalf, saying, "Dear Ingrid, your great talent has been justly rewarded tonight." Bergman and Rossellini's marriage ended in 1957. The passion that fueled their scandal had faded. Rossellini had begun an affair with Indian screenwriter Sonali Dasgupta, Errol Flynn, and Patricia Wymore. 1950 found Errol Flynn, Hollywood's notorious bad boy, at a career crossroads. The 41-year-old actor, famous for swashbuckling roles, was married to his second wife, Nora Eddington. His reputation for womanizing was well established. Flynn met 23-year-old Patricia Wymore on the set of Rocky Mountain. Wymore, a rising starlet, was cast as Flynn's love interest. Their on-screen chemistry quickly translated to real life. Despite being married, Flynn pursued Wymore openly. Co-star Slim Pickens later recalled, "Errol didn't try to hide it. He was smitten with Pat from day one." News of the affair reached Eddington. She filed for divorce in 1949, citing cruel and inhuman treatment. The divorce was finalized in 1950, just as Flynn's relationship with Wymore intensified. Flynn and Wymore married on October 23, 1950, in Monte Carlo. It was Flynn's third marriage. The press dubbed them Beauty and the Beast, referencing Flynn's aging looks and reputation. In 1951, Wymore gave birth to their daughter, Arnella. Flynn's joy was short-lived. His career was in decline, and financial troubles loomed. The couple separated multiple times. Flynn's behavior became increasingly erratic. In 1957, he was arrested in Italy for public drunkenness. Wymore bailed him out, saying, "Someone has to look after him." Despite the challenges, Wymore remained devoted. She accompanied Flynn on his ill-fated trip to Cuba in 1958. Flynn's attempts to make a comeback documentary were derailed by the Cuban Revolution. On October 14, 1959, Flynn died of a heart attack at 50. Wymore was devastated. She later said, "For all his faults, I loved him till the end." Humphrey Bogart and Mayo Method. 1938 saw Humphrey Bogart, 39, marrying his third wife, Mayo Method, 34. Bogart was a rising star, known for tough guy roles. Method, a stage and screen actress, had a reputation for heavy drinking. Their marriage quickly became volatile. Hollywood nicknamed them the Battling Bogarts. Their fights were frequent and often public. Actor David Niven once said, "The Bogarts' battles were bloody and public. Terrible, traumatic affairs. Method's jealousy was legendary. She often accused Bogart of infidelity, sometimes with cause. In 1942, Bogart had a brief affair with his Across the Pacific co-star Mary Astor. 1944 marked a turning point. Bogart began filming To Have and Have Not with 19-year-old Lauren Bacall. Their on-screen chemistry was electric. Off-screen, a romance blossomed. Method's suspicions reached new heights. She frequently visited the set, causing scenes. Director Howard Hawks recalled, "Mayo would show up soused and cause all kinds of trouble." The affair continued after filming wrapped. Method's drinking worsened. In one incident, she stabbed Bogart with a knife. He required stitches but told the press he'd walked into a door. By 1945, the marriage was beyond repair. Bogart moved out of their home. He later said, "The trouble with Mayo is that she's a drunk, and the trouble with me is that I'm a drunk too." Bogart filed for divorce in February 1945. It was finalized in May. He married Bacall just 11 days later. The press had a field day, painting Method as the scorned wife. Method never recovered from the divorce. Her acting career faltered. She returned to her hometown of Portland, Oregon, where she died in 1951 at 47. Gary Cooper and Patricia Neal. 1948 saw Gary Cooper, 47, at the height of his career. The married father of one was Hollywood's quintessential leading man. Patricia Neal, 22, was a rising star fresh from Broadway success. They met on the set of The Fountainhead in 1949. Cooper, married to Veronica Balfi since 1933, was immediately taken with Neal. Their on-screen chemistry was palpable. As filming progressed, their relationship intensified. Neal later recalled, "I was so in love with Gary Cooper. He was the most gorgeous thing you've ever seen in your life." News of the affair reached Balfi. She confronted Cooper, who initially denied any wrongdoing. The situation came to a head when Balfi found Neal's love letters in Cooper's pocket. Cooper's daughter Maria, 12 at the time, was devastated by the affair. She later wrote, "I felt betrayed and abandoned. It nearly destroyed our family." The affair continued after filming Wrapped. Cooper bought Neal a charm bracelet, inscribing each charm with significant dates in their relationship. Neal treasured it for years. 1951 marked a turning point. Cooper, torn between his family and Neil, suffered a crisis of conscience. His friend, priest Father Harold Ford, counseled him to end the affair. Neil, hoping Cooper would leave his wife, was heartbroken when he chose his family. She later said, "I was so hurt. I thought I would die from the pain of losing him." The end of the affair took its toll on Neil. She had an emotional breakdown and fled to England. There, she began a relationship with writer Roald Dahl, whom she later married. Cooper reconciled with his wife and daughter. He recommitted to his Catholic faith, a decision that weighed heavily in ending the affair. Maria later stated, "Dad's return to the church saved our family." Years later, when Cooper was dying of cancer in 1961, Neil visited him in the hospital. It was their first meeting since the affair ended. Neil described it as a moment of closure. Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier. 1953 found Vivien Leigh, 40, and Laurence Olivier, 46, as Hollywood's golden couple. Married since 1940, their union was seen as the epitome of romantic success in the entertainment world. Cracks in their relationship began to show during the filming of Elephant Walk in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. Leigh, cast opposite Peter Finch, began an affair with her co-star. Olivier, in London at the time, was unaware of the developing situation. Leigh's behavior on set became erratic. Director William Dieterle later said, "Vivien was clearly unwell. Her mood swings were extreme." As filming progressed, Leigh's mental state deteriorated. She suffered a nervous breakdown and was replaced in the film by Elizabeth Taylor. Olivier flew to Ceylon to bring her home. Upon their return to England, the truth of Leigh's affair with Finch emerged. Olivier was devastated. He later wrote, "I could hardly believe that the woman I loved and knew so well was capable of such a betrayal." The affair marked a turning point in Leigh and Olivier's marriage. Leigh's struggles with bipolar disorder, then undiagnosed, added further strain to their relationship. 1956 saw another blow to their union. Olivier began an affair with actress Joan Plowright during a production of The Entertainer. Leigh, aware of the relationship, was heartbroken. Despite these challenges, Leigh and Olivier attempted to salvage their marriage. They co-starred in The Sleeping Prince in 1957, but their on-stage chemistry couldn't mask their off-stage troubles. 1960 marked the end of their 20-year marriage. Olivier left Leigh for Plowright. Leigh told the press, "I don't think I've ever been so unhappy in my life." The divorce was finalized in 1961. Leigh never fully recovered from the end of her marriage to Olivier. She later said, "I would rather have lived a short life with Larry than face a long one without him." Olivier went on to marry Plowright, while Leigh's health and career declined. She struggled with mental illness and alcoholism in the years following the divorce. Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra. 1949 saw the beginning of one of Hollywood's most tempestuous relationships. Ava Gardner, 27, was a rising MGM star. Frank Sinatra, 34, was a fading singer, married with 3 children. Their first meeting was unremarkable. Gardner later recalled, "I thought Frank was a pompous little bastard." Sinatra was equally unimpressed, describing Gardner as stuck up. Everything changed at a 1950 Palm Springs party. Their attraction was immediate and intense. Gardner said, "It was magic. We became lovers forever, eternally." Big words, but I believe them. News of their affair spread quickly. Sinatra was still married to his first wife, Nancy. The scandal threatened both their careers. MGM warned Gardner to end the relationship. Sinatra's wife refused to grant him a divorce. His career nosedived. He lost his recording and film contracts. Gardner stood by him, even paying some of his debts. 1951 saw Sinatra finally secure a divorce. He and Gardner married on November 7th, just days after the divorce was finalized. The press dubbed them the Battling Sinatras. Their marriage was passionate but volatile. Both had fiery tempers and were prone to jealousy. Actor Peter Lawford once said, "They would fight and make up with equal intensity." 1953 marked a turning point. Gardner's career soared with Mogambo, while Sinatra struggled. He begged her to give up her career and stay home. She refused. Sinatra's career rebounded with his Oscar-winning role in From Here to Eternity in 1953. Gardner had lobbied hard for him to get the part, reportedly using her influence with studio heads. As Sinatra's star rose again, the marriage began to crumble. Both had affairs. Gardner later admitted, "We were great in bed. It was usually on the way to the bidet when the trouble began." 1957 saw their divorce finalized. Despite the split, they remained in each other's lives. Gardner said, "Frank and I had a lot of fun. We loved deeply. Whatever the problems, we had real passion." Gardner's career waned in the 1960s, while Sinatra's reached new heights. Yet, they remained friends. When Gardner suffered a stroke in 1986, Sinatra helped pay her medical bills. Lana Turner and Johnny Stompanato. 1957 found Lana Turner, 37, at the peak of her career. The sweater girl of the 1940s had transformed into a serious actress. She was twice divorced and a single mother to 14-year-old Cheryl. Johnny Stompanato, 32, entered Turner's life that year. A former Marine turned bodyguard for gangster Mickey Cohen, Stompanato was known for his good looks and dangerous connections. Their relationship began passionately. Turner later wrote, "I was drawn to him like a magnet. He was unlike any man I'd ever known." As their affair progressed, Stompanato's true nature emerged. He was possessive and violent. Turner's daughter Cheryl later recalled, "He threatened to kill her, to cut her face. He terrorized her." April 1958 marked a turning point. Turner was filming Another Time, Another Place with Sean Connery. Stompanato, jealous of Connery, stormed onto the set with a gun. Connery disarmed him, but the incident made headlines. Turner tried to end the relationship. Stompanato retaliated by threatening to disfigure her. He said, "I'll cut you good, baby. You'll never be beautiful again." On April 4, 1958, tragedy struck. Stompanato came to Turner's Beverly Hills home. An argument ensued. Cheryl, hearing the commotion, grabbed a kitchen knife and rushed to her mother's defense. In the chaos, Cheryl stabbed Stompanato. He died at the scene. Turner's frantic call to her mother was revealing, "Mother, I've killed Johnny, I've killed him." The coroner's inquest was a spectacle. Turner testified, describing Stompanato's abuse in detail. She said, "I was terrified. I thought this is the end, he's going to kill me." Cheryl was charged with justifiable homicide. The jury deliberated for just 25 minutes before acquitting her. They ruled the killing was justifiable homicide committed in defense of her mother. Turner's career survived the scandal. She received an Oscar nomination for Peyton Place just months after the incident. However, the events of 1958 haunted her for the rest of her life. Charlie Chaplin and Lita Grey. 1924 saw Charlie Chaplin, 35, as the most famous man in the world. The silent film star was at the height of his career, known for his Little Tramp character. Lita Grey entered Chaplin's life when she was just 12. He cast her in his 1921 film, The Kid. Grey later recalled, "He said I was to be his leading lady when I grew up." By 1924, Grey was 16 and Chaplin was casting for The Gold Rush. He began a relationship with Grey, despite the 19-year age gap. She later said, "I was fascinated by him. He was Chaplin." The affair took a dramatic turn when Grey became pregnant. Chaplin, fearing statutory rape charges, married Grey in secret in Mexico on November 26, 1924. News of the marriage shocked Hollywood. Chaplin's popularity took a hit. The press painted him as a lecherous older man who had taken advantage of a young girl. 1925 saw the birth of their first son, Charles Jr. A second son, Sidney, followed in 1926. Chaplin was often absent, focusing on his work rather than his family. Grey filed for divorce in 1927, citing mental cruelty. The divorce proceedings became a media circus. Grey's attorneys threatened to file criminal charges against Chaplin for his conduct during their courtship. The divorce settlement was the largest in American history at the time. Grey received $600,000 and $100,000 for each child. Chaplin's image was severely damaged by the scandal. In her 1966 autobiography, Grey wrote, "I was no more than a toy to him. I was his property, his slave, his and nobody else's." Chaplin's career eventually recovered, but his personal life remained tabloid fodder. He married twice more, both times to women much younger than himself. Susan Dey seemed to have it all: fame, beauty, and a starring role in one of America's most beloved TV families. But what if this fond memory of yours was the nightmare of Susan Dey herself? What if the one movie that you love so much was the beginning of the end for her joy and laughter? The start of stardom. Susan Dey's story feels like a classic Hollywood script. A young girl with dreams, a stroke of luck, and a sudden thrust into the spotlight. Born in Illinois in 1952, Susan grew up in a pretty normal middle-class family. Her father was a newspaper editor, which might explain her quiet love for books and words, and her mother was a nurse. But life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for Susan. Her mother passed away when she was just 8 years old, a loss that undoubtedly shaped her early years. It's hard to imagine how a child processes that kind of tragedy, but Susan managed to navigate it, showing a quiet resilience even then. As she grew up, Susan blossomed into a striking young woman, tall and graceful, with a kind of natural beauty that photographers adored. It wasn't long before modeling agencies noticed her. By her teenage years, Susan was modeling for magazines, and while it might have seemed glamorous, the world of modeling had its own challenges. At the time, Susan was incredibly shy. Imagine being a teenager still figuring yourself out. Suddenly, you are in front of cameras. They tell you to smile, pose, and project confidence. It wasn't easy, but she managed to pull it off, and her modeling career started to gain traction. Then something unexpected happened. In 1970, the opportunity of a lifetime came knocking. Although Susan probably didn't realize it at the time. She was just 17 when she was cast as Lori Partridge in The Partridge Family, a role that would change her life forever. She had no prior acting experience, none. But there was something about her presence, that quiet charm and wholesome look, that made her perfect for the part. It's said that when she landed the role, she hadn't even heard of Shirley Jones, who would play her on-screen mother, or David Cassidy, the show's teen heartthrob and her on-screen brother. Imagine being a teenager and stepping into the whirlwind that was The Partridge Family. The show wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. Almost overnight, Susan went from being an ordinary teenager to a household name. People couldn't get enough of the Partridge Clan, and Lori, with her cool demeanor and timeless beauty, became a fan favorite. But sudden fame can be a double-edged sword. Susan found herself under a spotlight she hadn't prepared for. The world expected her to be the perfect girl next door, like Lori Partridge. But Susan was just a young woman trying to find herself. It's hard to overstate how much pressure that kind of fame puts on a person. Susan had to juggle the demands of being on a hit TV show with the normal struggles of growing up. She later admitted that she was painfully self-conscious during those years. She struggled with her body image, and the pressures of being constantly in the public eye only made things worse. But through it all, Susan remained professional and dedicated to her work. Even though she was just a teenager, she carried herself with a maturity beyond her years, impressing her co-stars and audiences alike. Looking back, her entry into Hollywood feels almost accidental, like fate had something special planned for her. But as her story unfolds, it becomes clear that her early fame and success brought new challenges. They would test her in ways she never imagined. Life in the spotlight. After The Partridge Family came to an end in 1974, Susan Dey faced a challenge that so many young actors encounter: breaking free from the role that had made her famous. For 4 seasons, she had been Lori Partridge, the epitome of the perfect girl next door. Audiences loved her for it, but in Hollywood, that kind of typecasting can be a double-edged sword. While Lori Partridge had made Susan a star, it also threatened to define her career forever, and she was determined not to let that happen. Susan began seeking roles that would show a different side of her, something far removed from Lori's wholesome image. Susan Dey seemed to have it all: fame, beauty, and a starring role in one of America's most beloved TV families. But what if this fond memory of yours was the nightmare of Susan Dey herself? What if the one movie that you love so much was the beginning of the end for her joy and laughter, the start of stardom? Susan Dey's story feels like a classic Hollywood script: a young girl with dreams, a stroke of luck, and a sudden thrust into the spotlight. Born in Illinois in 1952, Susan grew up in a pretty normal middle-class family. Her father was a newspaper editor, which might explain her quiet love for books and words, and her mother was a nurse. But life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for Susan. Her mother passed away when she was just 8 years old, a loss that undoubtedly shaped her early years. It's hard to imagine how a child processes that kind of tragedy, but Susan managed to navigate it, showing a quiet resilience even then. As she grew up, Susan blossomed into a striking young woman, tall and graceful, with a kind of natural beauty that photographers adored. It wasn't long before modeling agencies noticed her. By her teenage years, Susan was modeling for magazines, and while it might have seemed glamorous, the world of modeling had its own challenges. At the time, Susan was incredibly shy. Imagine being a teenager, still figuring yourself out. Suddenly, you are in front of cameras. They tell you to smile, pose, and project confidence. It wasn't easy, but she managed to pull it off, and her modeling career started to gain traction. Then something unexpected happened. In 1970, the opportunity of a lifetime came knocking. Although Susan probably didn't realize it at the time, she was just 17 when she was cast as Lori Partridge in The Partridge Family, a role that would change her life forever. She had no prior acting experience, none. But there was something about her presence, that quiet charm and wholesome look, that made her perfect for the part. It's said that when she landed the role, she hadn't even heard of Shirley Jones, who would play her on-screen mother, or David Cassidy, the show's teen heartthrob and her on-screen brother. Imagine being a teenager and stepping into the whirlwind that was The Partridge Family. The show wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. Almost overnight, Susan went from being an ordinary teenager to a household name. People couldn't get enough of the Partridge Clan, and Lori, with her cool demeanor and timeless beauty, became a fan favorite. But sudden fame can be a double-edged sword. Susan found herself under a spotlight she hadn't prepared for. The world expected her to be the perfect girl next door, like Lori Partridge. But Susan was just a young woman trying to find herself. It's hard to overstate how much pressure that kind of fame puts on a person. Susan had to juggle the demands of being on a hit TV show with the normal struggles of growing up. She later admitted that she was painfully self-conscious during those years. She struggled with her body image, and the pressures of being constantly in the public eye only made things worse. But through it all, Susan remained professional and dedicated to her work. Even though she was just a teenager, she carried herself with a maturity beyond her years, impressing her co-stars and audiences alike. Looking back, her entry into Hollywood feels almost accidental, like fate had something special planned for her. But as her story unfolds, it becomes clear that her early fame and success brought new challenges. They would test her in ways she never imagined. Life in the spotlight. After The Partridge Family came to an end in 1974, Susan Dey faced a challenge that so many young actors encounter: breaking free from the role that had made her famous. For 4 seasons, she had been Lori Partridge, the epitome of the perfect girl next door. Audiences loved her for it, but in Hollywood, that kind of typecasting can be a double-edged sword. While Lori Partridge had made Susan a star, it also threatened to define her career forever, and she was determined not to let that happen. Susan began seeking roles that would show a different side of her, something far removed from Lori's wholesome image. But the transition wasn't easy. Hollywood wasn't quite sure what to do with her. This young actress was a stunningly beautiful, talented star, but she was so linked to a single role that casting her in anything else felt like a gamble to producers. For a few years, she found herself in the dreaded post-sitcom limbo. There were roles here and there, but none that truly gave her the chance to showcase her range or step out of Lori's shadow. But Susan wasn't one to give up easily. She kept at it, honing her craft and learning as much as she could about acting. And eventually, her persistence paid off. In the 1980s, she landed the role that would redefine her career: Grace Van Owen on LA Law. It was a game changer. Grace was smart, ambitious, and confident, everything Lori Partridge wasn't. The role allowed Susan to step into a more mature, complex character, and she absolutely shined. Critics praised her performance, and she earned a Golden Globe Award and several Emmy nominations for her work on the show. This was Susan's chance to prove that she was more than just a sitcom star, and she seized it with both hands. LA Law became one of the defining shows of the 1980s, and Susan's portrayal of Grace Van Owen was a big part of its success. She added depth to the character. She balanced Grace's toughness in court with her vulnerability in her personal life. It was a role that allowed Susan to grow as an actress, and it earned her the respect of her peers in the industry. But even with this success, Susan remained cautious about fame. She had learned from her Partridge Family days how fleeting and overwhelming the spotlight could be. While she loved acting, she wasn't interested in the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Susan valued her privacy and preferred to stay out of the tabloids, focusing instead on her work and personal life. This attitude set her apart from many peers. It earned her a reputation as someone serious about her craft, but not obsessed with stardom. Her time on LA Law marked a high point in her career. It let her escape her past and build a new identity in Hollywood. It proved that Susan Dey wasn't just Lori Partridge. She was a talented actress who could compete in a tough industry. And while the road to that success wasn't easy, Susan's determination and resilience made it all the more rewarding. The price of fame. Behind the scenes of her professional achievements, Susan Dey's life wasn't without its share of struggles and challenges, many of which she kept hidden from the public eye for years. One of the most profound battles she faced was with anorexia, a struggle that began during her time on The Partridge Family. On screen, she was the picture of health and youthful beauty, but off-screen, she was quietly grappling with the pressures of fame and the unforgiving beauty standards of the entertainment industry. Susan later revealed that as a teenager on the show, she became obsessively focused on maintaining a certain image, one she believed was expected of her. The cameras, the fans, and the relentless scrutiny all contributed to an overwhelming sense of self-consciousness. She started restricting her eating to an alarming degree, convinced that thinner was better. Looking back, it's heartbreaking to imagine the young star smiling on set, hitting her marks, and charming audiences while secretly battling such a painful and isolating condition. What made it even harder was the lack of understanding and support for eating disorders at the time. In the 1970s, these issues weren't widely discussed, especially not in Hollywood. Susan carried this burden largely on her own, hiding it from her co-stars and the public. David Cassidy, her on-screen brother and the object of her off-screen crush, later admitted he noticed something was wrong but didn't know how to help. It's a stark reminder of how lonely these struggles can be, even for someone surrounded by people. As she moved on from the Partridge Family and worked to reinvent her career, Susan also had to confront the personal toll of her struggles. Her battle with anorexia didn't just affect her physically. It took a mental and emotional toll as well. It's a testament to her strength that she was able to continue working, pushing forward and refusing to let her struggles define her entirely. Beyond her eating disorder, Susan also faced challenges in her personal relationships. Her crush on David Cassidy during their Partridge Family days was unrequited, and while she kept things professional on set, it hurt deeply. Cassidy later wrote about how Susan had confessed her feelings for him, but he didn't feel the same way, seeing her more as a sister than a romantic interest. For Susan, this rejection was another blow to her self-esteem during an already fragile time. As she grew older and gained more control over her life and career, Susan began to step back from the limelight. She chose to prioritize her well-being and live more privately, away from the relentless pressures of Hollywood. In doing so, she set an example for others, showing that it's okay to step away when the cost of fame becomes too great. Susan's struggles remind us that even the brightest stars carry shadows. Her courage in facing her challenges, whether it was her eating disorder or her personal heartbreaks, is a testament to her resilience. It's easy to see the polished surface of fame and forget the human being behind it, matters of the heart. One of the more bittersweet elements of her story is the complicated dynamic she shares with her former Partridge Family castmates, particularly David Cassidy. While they shared an on-screen bond as Lori and Keith Partridge, their off-screen relationship was far more layered and, at times, strained. During the show's run, Susan developed a deep crush on David Cassidy. He was, after all, one of the most idolized teen heartthrobs of the era, with legions of fans swooning over his every move. For Susan, the attraction wasn't just about his looks. They spent long hours together on set, sharing jokes, conversations, and the unique experience of skyrocketing fame. In her youthful eyes, it felt natural to develop feelings for someone she was so closely tied to. However, David didn't return those feelings. He cared about Susan, but saw her as a friend and co-worker, someone he respected but wasn't romantically interested in. David later recounted in his memoir how Susan had confided her feelings for him, and though he tried to let her down gently, The situation created an undeniable tension. For Susan, the rejection was painful, not just because of her personal feelings, but because they had to continue working side by side, maintaining their cheerful sibling dynamic on screen. The experience left an emotional mark on her, especially as David began dating other women during their time on the show. Over the years, their relationship shifted in other ways as well. After the Partridge Family ended, the cast naturally drifted apart, as often happens after long projects. But in Susan's case, her departure from the group was more pronounced. She made the decision not to participate in Partridge Family reunions or fan conventions, a choice that some interpreted as her wanting to distance herself from the role of Lori Partridge altogether. For Susan, it wasn't necessarily about rejecting her past, but rather about moving forward and focusing on new opportunities in her career and personal life. David, on the other hand, embraced the Partridge Family legacy, frequently performing the show's songs and engaging with its devoted fan base. Their differing attitudes toward the show created a noticeable rift, and while they were never openly hostile to each other, there was a sense of distance that lingered. David later expressed disappointment over Susan's reluctance to stay connected with the cast, admitting that he wished things had turned out differently between them. For Susan, it seemed like an emotional balancing act. On the one hand, she had immense gratitude for the show that launched her career and brought her into the public eye. On the other, it represented a time in her life when she struggled with self-esteem, eating disorders, and unrequited feelings, all while being under the microscope of fame. It's understandable that she would feel conflicted about revisiting those years, especially in a nostalgic, fan-centric setting. Despite the complexities of their relationship, there was mutual respect between Susan and David. When David passed away in 2017, Susan released a heartfelt statement, mourning the loss of her former co-star and reflecting on the impact he had on her life. It was a poignant reminder that, no matter the differences or tensions over the years, there was an unbreakable bond formed during those Partridge Family days. Her first marriage was to Leonard "Lenny" Herschen, a talent agent and producer. The couple tied the knot in 1976 during a time when Susan was still navigating her post-Partridge Family fame and trying to establish herself as a serious actress. Lenny, 25 years her senior, brought a sense of stability and experience to her life, perhaps offering guidance as she balanced her rising career with the challenges of early adulthood in Hollywood. Together, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah Day Herschen, making Susan a mother for the first time. For Susan, motherhood likely added another layer of complexity to her already busy life. Being a young star in the public eye while raising a child is no easy feat, and it's not hard to imagine the pressures she must have faced in trying to balance it all. However, despite the shared joys of parenthood, Susan and Lenny's marriage began to unravel. By 1981, the couple had divorced, marking the end of what might have seemed like a fairy tale union from the outside. After her divorce, Susan kept her personal life relatively private, focusing on her career and her role as a mother. However, love found her again when she met Bernard Safransky, a television producer. The two married in 1988, and this union marked the beginning of a more grounded and settled phase in her life. Bernard wasn't a flashy Hollywood type. He worked behind the scenes, and that likely appealed to Susan, who by then was leaning toward a quieter, more private existence. Their marriage has endured for decades, a rarity in the entertainment world, and speaks to the strength of their partnership. While the details of their relationship remain largely under wraps, it's clear that Susan values her privacy and prefers to keep her personal life out of the limelight. It's refreshing, really, in an industry where so much of one's life can be splashed across tabloids and dissected for public consumption. Susan's second marriage seems to have given her the stability and support she needed after the ups and downs of her earlier years. With Bernard, she's been able to build a life that's far removed from the chaos of Hollywood, focusing on the things that matter most to her. For someone who spent much of her youth in the spotlight, this enduring relationship seems to have provided her with the calm and balance she always sought. Though she doesn't speak much about her personal life publicly, her choices suggest a woman who has prioritized authenticity and meaningful connections over the fleeting allure of fame. Her marriages, particularly her long-lasting union with Bernard, show that Susan Dey has found her own version of happiness, a life built on love, privacy, and a focus on what truly matters, the failed pursuit of happiness. As the years went by, Susan Dey's career began to slow down, but it wasn't just about fewer roles coming her way. It was also a conscious decision on her part. Hollywood can be relentless, and after decades of working under its spotlight, Susan started pulling back, choosing a quieter, more private life away from the chaos of the industry. For someone who had spent her formative years in the public eye, this shift was both deliberate and refreshing. Susan wasn't interested in chasing fame endlessly. After her success on LA Law and other projects, she'd proven herself as an actress and had nothing left to prove. Hollywood, with all its glitz and glamour, wasn't what she wanted for the long haul. She started prioritizing her personal life over her professional one, focusing on what truly made her happy. And honestly, who could blame her? After years of being scrutinized, celebrated, and occasionally criticized, she wanted to reclaim her time and energy for herself. Her retreat from the public eye also aligned with her desire to live a more grounded, balanced life. Susan had always been somewhat private, even during her career's peak, and stepping away felt natural. She wasn't the type to chase after roles that didn't inspire her, or to make appearances just for the sake of staying. When it comes to Hollywood sweethearts, so many ladies are on the list, but none of these actresses were quite like the amazing Carol Wayne. There was more to her than met the eye, and men from all over the world were drawn to her for reasons beyond her physical beauty. The matinee lady effect. It's the ultimate example of why men were drawn to her. She wasn't just another pretty face. She had this magical blend of innocence and sensuality that was downright magnetic. She'd walk onto the Tonight Show set with that dazzling smile, playing this sweet but slightly ditzy character who seemed completely unaware of how jaw-droppingly gorgeous she was. That mix of naivety and bombshell energy? Men couldn't resist it. Her flirtation was never over the top. It wasn't aggressive or intimidating. It was playful. It was the kind of teasing that left men grinning, wondering if there was a wink hidden behind her big doe-like eyes. And then you'd have Johnny Carson, cool as ever, setting her up for these hilarious double entendres. The chemistry between them was electric. Johnny would toss out a sly line, and Carol, with perfect comedic timing, would deliver a somehow innocent and suggestive response. It was pure magic. But here's the thing. She owned that character. Men watching at home saw her as the ultimate fantasy, a woman who was stunning, funny, and approachable. She didn't come across as untouchable or overly polished like some other stars of her time. Instead, she felt like someone you'd dream about meeting at a party, the kind of woman who'd laugh at your jokes and make you feel like the most interesting guy in the room. And let's not forget how her presence amplified Johnny Carson's humor. She wasn't just there to stand and look pretty, she was a comedic partner. She'd roll with the jokes, often playing the oblivious foil to Carson's quick wit, and men ate it up because it made her seem even more endearing. She was the bombshell with a heart and a sense of humor, and that's a rare combination. Men didn't just want to look at her, they wanted to be around her, and she was a classic Hollywood beauty. When you think of the ultimate 1970s bombshell, she fits the picture perfectly. Her striking blonde hair was the kind of golden cascade that turned heads wherever she went, effortlessly glamorous without looking overdone. But her hourglass figure? It was pure old Hollywood, the kind of silhouette men dreamed about and women admired. And then there was her smile, radiant and warm, with just the right amount of playfulness to make you feel like she had a secret she might share, but only with you. What set Carol apart from many other beauties of her time was how she embodied the idealized look of the era while still feeling relatable. She didn't have the icy, untouchable vibe of someone like Grace Kelly or the overpowering appeal of Raquel Welch. Carol was glamorous, yes, but in a way that felt down to earth. Her beauty wasn't intimidating. It was approachable. She looked like the kind of woman you could take to a fancy dinner and still joke around with afterward. Compared to her contemporaries, she struck a balance that was rare. Marilyn Monroe before her was all about mystery and seduction, while 1970s stars like Farrah Fawcett leaned more toward fresh-faced, sporty allure. Carol, on the other hand, seemed to exist in this perfect middle ground, effortlessly sexy, but never over the top. She carried herself with an ease that made men feel like they might actually have a chance with her, even if she was light years out of their league. Her look was so iconic because it wasn't just about her features, it was about her presence. When she walked into a room or appeared on screen, she didn't just attract attention, she held it. That mix of timeless beauty and an inviting charm was exactly what made Carol Wayne stand out and why she remains such a memorable figure from that golden era of television. Her magnetic personality. Her warm and friendly personality made her truly unforgettable. People who worked with her often described her as kind, approachable, and genuinely down-to-earth qualities that set her apart in the often cutthroat world of Hollywood. Unlike some stars of her era, she didn't put on airs or treat people like they were beneath her. Instead, she had a way of making everyone feel at ease, whether they were a co-star, a crew member, or a fan. One story that keeps popping up is how she treated everyone on set with the same level of respect and kindness. From assistants to producers, people would recall her stopping to chat, flashing that famous smile and making them feel seen. She had this knack for breaking the ice in a way that felt natural, even in high-pressure environments. For someone who radiated star power, she was remarkably humble. Johnny Carson, for one, seemed to really appreciate her easygoing nature. While he was known to have a sharp wit and sometimes a prickly demeanor, Carol's warmth helped create that effortless chemistry they shared during their sketches. She had a way of rolling with his jokes and never taking herself too seriously, which audiences loved. That same ability to laugh at herself made her even more endearing. She wasn't just another pretty face, but someone who could laugh along with the audience and with herself. There's another layer to her personality that made her relatable. Despite her fame, Carol was known to struggle with self-doubt and insecurity. Instead of hiding it, she let glimpses of that vulnerability show, and people loved her all the more for it. It made her human, someone you could root for, not just admire from afar. At the end of the day, Carol Wayne wasn't just someone men wanted to be with, she was someone everyone wanted to be around. Her genuine kindness and ability to connect with people made her as unforgettable off-screen as she was on it. Her playful humor. While she's best remembered for her comedic turn as the matinee lady on The Tonight Show, Carol showed time and again that she was far more than a one-note actress. Her ability to step into different roles, from drama to light-hearted comedy, left a lasting impression on audiences, and men, in particular, couldn't get enough of it. In the early stages of her career, Carol appeared in a variety of TV shows and films that showcased her range. She wasn't confined to one genre. For instance, she had roles on TV series like I Dream of Jeannie and the Man from UNCLE, where she played everything from a glamorous guest star to a more dramatic, mysterious character. These appearances were proof that she could adapt to any role, never letting her beauty overshadow her acting chops. In films like The Happy Hooker Goes to Washington and The Big Bus, Carol also showed her talent for both comedic and slightly risque roles, playing characters with humor and charm, but also depth. Men admired how effortlessly she shifted between roles, whether she was delivering deadpan comedy or adding a bit of dramatic weight to a scene. It was this ability to adapt that made her even more captivating. She wasn't just playing a part. She was bringing something unique to each role, keeping audiences interested and engaged. What really stood out was Carol's ability to balance her glamorous blonde bombshell persona with a more subtle, nuanced performance. In one instance, she played a more serious role on The Rockford Files, where she wasn't just eye candy, but a complex character with a storyline that required genuine acting. Men who had originally admired her for her comedic timing and beauty were now impressed by her depth and range. It wasn't just about looking good, she was showing them that she could handle more than just the dumb blonde stereotype. This versatility earned her a lot of respect. Men didn't just admire her for her beauty anymore, they saw her as someone with serious acting ability. She could walk into a comedy scene and have everyone in stitches, then shift into a more serious moment without missing a beat. That's what made her stand out in Hollywood, especially when so many actresses were pigeonholed into one type of role. Carol never allowed herself to be typecast, and men admired her for that. She was more than just the girl next door or the bombshell. She was an actress who could hold her own no matter the role. Her versatility made her even more appealing because it showcased her as an all-around woman, someone who could light up a screen with her humor, dazzle with her looks, and still hold the audience's attention when the story got serious. This rare combination is exactly why men admired Carol so much. She wasn't just a fleeting star. She was a true talent who could thrive in any role, and that kept her interesting long after the screen went dark. Her real vulnerability. Men were drawn to this aspect of her personality because it gave her an authenticity that made her feel real, like someone you could connect with on a deeper level. Behind her dazzling smile and glamorous image, Carol struggled with self-doubt and insecurity, something she often kept hidden from the public eye. Those who knew her best, though, recognized that she was not immune to the pressures that came with being a public figure in Hollywood. She sometimes questioned her looks, her worth, and her abilities, which, ironically, made her even more endearing. She wasn't perfect, and she didn't pretend to be. She showed a side of herself that was unguarded, and that's what made her more approachable and human in the eyes of men. What really made this vulnerability stand out was how she balanced it with the image of the glamorous star. When Carol stepped onto a stage or appeared on a talk show, it was clear she had a command of the room, but behind that public persona was a woman who longed for reassurance, just like anyone else. That contrast between the poised, on-screen bombshell and the more uncertain woman off-camera made her even more appealing. It was as though she wasn't trying to live up to an unattainable ideal. Instead, she allowed herself to be real, and that authenticity was something men appreciated. Men found this vulnerability refreshing because it's rare to see a woman in Hollywood, especially one as beautiful and glamorous as Carol, who didn't constantly project a sense of invincibility. Instead of hiding her flaws, Carol allowed them to be seen. It was this self-awareness, this ability to acknowledge her insecurities, that made her feel more grounded, more like someone you could actually get to know and understand. And yet, despite her vulnerability, she still commanded attention, and men found that balance irresistible. There's something deeply attractive about someone who is secure enough to embrace their imperfections. Carol's ability to show a softer, more introspective side while still radiating warmth and beauty is what made her so magnetic. She wasn't just a star, she was a person with depth, someone you could relate to beyond her on-screen roles. This vulnerability wasn't always visible in her work, but it shone through in the little moments. The way she interacted with her co-stars, her willingness to share a laugh at her own expense, or the times when she let her guard down just enough to reveal that she wasn't perfect. It made men admire her more because she wasn't just a fantasy or a flawless figure. She was someone who had her struggles, just like anyone else, and that made her more real and more lovable. Her captivating eyes. Carol Wayne's eyes were, without a doubt, one of her most captivating features, and they played a huge role in why men were so drawn to her. They were extremely beautiful, and had an incredible depth that could convey multiple emotions at once. In every scene, her big, expressive eyes spoke volumes, often saying more than words ever could. Whether she was in a comedic skit, a dramatic role, or just being herself on talk shows, those eyes became a window into her soul, making her instantly magnetic to anyone who watched. Her eyes had this perfect combination of innocence, mischief, and allure. They could look wide and innocent, like a sweet girl next door, and then, in the next moment, flicker with a hint of mischief or flirtation, making it clear that there was more to her than met the eye. In comedy sketches, her eyes were often used to her advantage. When she'd deliver a deadpan line or play the naive character, those big eyes would often give away her true understanding of the joke, creating a subtle but playful tension that made her even more endearing. In moments of romance or flirtation, her eyes were mesmerizing. They could convey a sense of longing or vulnerability, drawing men in with an unspoken promise of mystery and possibility. It wasn't just about how they looked, it was about how they made you feel. Carol's gaze had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, even if you were just watching her on TV. There was an intimacy in her eyes that made every scene more engaging. Her eyes were also a part of her charm in real life. When you hear people talk about Carol Wayne off-screen, many mention how her eyes would light up when she smiled or how they could convey warmth and kindness in an instant. Men admired how those eyes seemed to reflect her personality, genuine, approachable, but also undeniably captivating. What made Carol's eyes stand out even more was how they contrasted with the glamour and the polish of Hollywood at the time. While many actresses were made up to perfection, Carol's eyes told a different story. They were natural, full of life, and full of expression. They gave her an authenticity that set her apart from the typical Hollywood look. It wasn't just her beauty that men were drawn to. It was the way her eyes told stories, whether it was through the innocence of her gaze, the hint of mischief behind it, or the allure that made her impossible to look away from. Signature presence. There was something about the way she carried herself that commanded attention without needing to be the loudest or the most in-your-face person in the room. Whether she was on The Tonight Show next to Johnny Carson or in any scene, Carol had this quiet but powerful magnetism that made her stand out instantly. It was a rare quality, one that didn't rely on constant chatter or over-the-top gestures. Instead, it was all about the subtlety of her demeanor. First, there was the way Carol used her expressions. Her face could convey so much with just a slight arch of her eyebrow or the faintest smile. She didn't need to overact or exaggerate. With one look, she could go from playful to serious, from innocent to mischievous, and it always felt completely natural. Men were drawn to that. It wasn't the loud, dramatic gestures they were used to from Hollywood starlets. Carol's ability to draw attention through just a flicker of expression was fascinating. Then there was her posture. Carol always stood tall with grace, yet there was something incredibly relaxed about the way she held herself. She didn't seem stiff or forced. There was a confidence in the way she stood that came off as effortless. When she was in a scene, whether she was delivering a joke or just sharing a moment with Johnny Carson, she always seemed comfortable in her own skin. Her confidence didn't scream for attention, it simply was. Men admired that kind of natural, unshakable presence. She didn't have to prove anything. She simply existed, and that drew people in. Even when she was standing next to someone like Johnny Carson with his larger-than-life personality, Carol's presence was undeniable. She didn't need to be the center of attention to steal the scene. Just her standing there with her charm and grace made her magnetic. When she flashed a smile or tilted her head slightly, it was as if the whole room focused on her. She had this ability to make even the most mundane moments feel electric, simply because she was in the room. Men were drawn to this signature presence because it was different from what they saw in most Hollywood actresses of the time. While many were loud, flashy, or trying hard to be noticed, Carol had an ease about her that made you want to pay attention. It was as if she knew exactly how much to give, never too little but never overdone. She could be quiet yet commanding, subtle but striking, and that was part of what made her so unforgettable. Whether she was cracking a joke with Johnny or simply sitting in the background, Carol Wayne had a way of making every moment feel special just because she was there. Her quiet confidence. She didn't need to constantly remind everyone of her beauty or talent. She simply was beautiful and talented, and she carried herself with a quiet assurance that made her even more attractive. It wasn't the loud, attention-grabbing confidence often associated with Hollywood stars. Hers was more refined, more natural. Men loved that about her because it felt real. Carol didn't walk into a room and demand attention. She didn't need to. There was something about her presence that made you notice her without her having to say or do anything. Whether she was on The Tonight Show beside Johnny Carson or on set, she radiated an inner confidence that wasn't cocky or overbearing, but instead, it was a calm, collected strength that was magnetic. What made Carol's confidence so special was that it didn't come across as arrogance. She didn't flaunt her beauty or her success. She simply embraced it. While many stars in Hollywood could be seen trying to outshine everyone, Carol had a way of standing out without even trying. Her beauty was undeniable, but she never used it as a tool to overshadow others. There was an ease in the way she moved through the world, whether she was making a joke, sharing a moment with a co-star, or just sitting in the background. Men admired that effortless self-assurance because it felt grounded and authentic. It made her approachable rather than intimidating. Her confidence also made her incredibly charismatic. When she spoke, you listened, not because she demanded attention, but because there was something magnetic in her demeanor. She knew who she was and didn't feel the need to prove herself to anyone. It was a trait that made her even more appealing to men because it signaled that she wasn't just a pretty face. She had substance and an inner strength that didn't need to be broadcasted. It was the kind of confidence that made Carol feel like someone you could actually connect with, someone who was both strong and relatable at the same time. Men found that balance irresistible. Her ability to shine without overshadowing others, her self-assurance without arrogance. It was this quiet confidence that made Carol Wayne an unforgettable figure. Soft and compassionate. By every stretch of the imagination, she was someone who genuinely cared about others, and it showed in everything she did. Those who worked with her consistently spoke about how kind, thoughtful, and generous she was, both on and off the screen. This warmth made her someone you wanted to be around, someone you could talk to easily without the usual walls that come with fame. One of the things that stood out most about Carol was her ability to make people feel comfortable. Whether it was a fellow actor, a crew member, or even someone she met briefly, she had this way of making them feel seen and heard. She wasn't just nodding along to a conversation, she was fully present. That kind of attention to detail, the ability to make people feel important in an often fast-paced, impersonal industry, was something rare. Men especially were drawn to that. In a world full of superficial interactions, Carol's ability to be genuinely kind and compassionate was incredibly appealing. It was a reminder that beauty and fame don't need to overshadow who you are as a person. Carol's compassion wasn't just about being friendly, it was about her generosity of spirit. There are several stories of how she would go out of her way to help others, whether it was offering support to a colleague who was going through a tough time or just being a sounding board for someone in need. She didn't expect anything in return. She just had a natural instinct to care for the people around her. Men loved that quality because it showed depth. It was easy to admire someone for their looks, but it was the kindness behind those looks that made her unforgettable. She also had a softness in her approach to humor. While many actresses could be sharp or harsh in their delivery, Carol had a gentler way of getting laughs. Her comedic timing was flawless, but there was always an underlying sweetness in her performances. She didn't need to be biting or sarcastic to be funny. Her humor came from a place of warmth. That made her more relatable and human, which men found incredibly attractive. Hollywood loves a rebel until she becomes too much to handle. For every leading lady who played by the rules, there were a few who tore up the script, set fire to the set, and dared anyone to stop them. From on-set tantrums to feuds that turned into full-blown wars, these women didn't just break the rules, they rewrote them in red lipstick and bad decisions. Welcome to Hollywood's Bad Girls Club. Miriam Hopkins. She was the kind of actress who could light up the screen, but she was also one of those people who could drive everyone around her absolutely insane. Now, don't get me wrong, she had talent, no doubt about that, but she also had a personality that made directors want to pull their hair out and co-stars pray for patience. When she took on roles, she did more than just acting. She dominated. The problem was, she was also a dominating person, even off-screen. Whenever she didn't get her way, she would pull your ear out with whining and complaining. She would tell everyone within a 10-mile radius, and if you had the misfortune of crossing her path and she had a problem with you, she'd plant seeds of hatred in everyone around you. All these are not just cheap talk. Her feud with Bette Davis was legendary. These two couldn't stand each other, and when they were forced to work together, it was like putting a lit match next to a gas tank. Things really exploded when they co-starred in The Old Maid in 1939. Problem was, both of them wanted to be the center of attraction on set, and Miriam was used to being the queen bee. Bette Davis, on the other hand, was coming in hot, and neither of them was about to back down. There were constant power struggles. Who got the better camera angles, who got the most screen time, who got to steal the spotlight. They were practically keeping score. At one point, Miriam was so fed up with Betty stealing her thunder that she would deliberately drag out her own scenes, forcing Betty to just stand there and wait. And if that wasn't petty enough, rumor has it that she took pleasure in making Betty redo her scenes as many times as possible just to mess with her. But none of these compares to how paranoid she was about being upstaged. If she thought another actress was stealing attention, she'd go out of her way to make sure the focus stayed on her. There's even a story that she used to tamper with costumes and props to throw off her co-stars. And don't even get me started on her competitive streak when it came to landing roles. She and Bette Davis had another major falling out when Betty got the part of Jezebel in 1938, a role that Miriam really wanted. Instead of congratulating her, Miriam acted like Betty had personally stolen it from her, and she never let it go. At the end of the day, she made Hollywood exciting, but she also made it exhausting. If she were around today, she'd probably be trending every other week for behind-the-scenes drama. But hey, at least she kept things interesting, right? Constance Bennett. Bennett was a full-blown diva, and she knew it. She walked onto every set like she owned the place, and honestly, sometimes she kind of did. For context, she came from Hollywood royalty. Her father was stage and film actor Richard Bennett, so she carried herself like she was above the usual rules of show business. And if someone tried to treat her like an ordinary actress, oh, they were in for a rude awakening. To be sure, directors, co-stars, producers, she clashed with all of them. She had a sharp tongue and an even sharper attitude, and she wasn't afraid to put people in their place if they didn't meet her expectations. There are stories of her walking off set mid-scene just because she didn't like how things were going. If a director dared to give her a note she didn't agree with, she'd argue right there on set, holding up production just to prove she wasn't one to be bossed around. In a nutshell, she also had standards. And by that, I mean she demanded the absolute best treatment at all times. She expected top billing, the best costumes, the best lighting, and her own personal space on set that no one else was allowed to invade. If her name wasn't in the biggest font on a movie poster, she'd throw a fit. And heaven help anyone who tried to make her do something she considered beneath her status. But how did this look like for everyone else around her? God question. One of her most infamous feuds was with Warner Brothers head Jack Warner. She signed a contract with the studio, but quickly decided she hated the way they operated. So what did she do? She found every loophole possible to make life miserable for them. She refused roles, showed up late, and made outrageous demands just to prove she wasn't going to play by their rules. Eventually, they gave up and let her go. That was Constance in a nutshell. Her way or no way at all. She might have been a nightmare to work with, but she made damn sure no one ever forgot her. Susan Hayward. This actress came up in Hollywood when the studios expected actresses to be sweet, submissive, and easy to control. But when it came to Susan, they were barking off the wrong tree. She had zero interest in playing nice. She had a reputation for being fiery, temperamental, and absolutely unwilling to take nonsense from anyone, whether it was a director, a co-star, or a producer trying to push her around. She fought tooth and nail for every role she got, and once she had it, she was all in, which sometimes made her a nightmare to work with. Directors would try to rein her in, but that made it 10 times worse. She had no patience for being micromanaged. If she didn't like how a scene was going, she'd let everyone know, and if she thought a director was incompetent, she wasn't shy about calling them out in front of the whole crew. It was bold, it was risky, but it was very Susan. As a matter of fact, one of her most famous clashes happened on the set of I'll Cry Tomorrow in 1955, where she played real-life alcoholic singer Lillian Roth. It was a brutal role, emotionally and physically draining, and she threw herself into it to the point of exhaustion. But on the bright side, Susan wasn't the type to admit weakness. That's good, right? Well, not exactly, because instead of taking a break, she just got angrier and more irritable. She lashed out at the director, complained about the grueling shooting schedule, and reportedly stormed off set more than once. But guess what? she still delivered an incredible performance that earned her an Oscar nomination. That was the thing about Susan. No matter how difficult she was, she always delivered. Marie Prevost. When it came to silent films, Marie Prevost was the it girl. Young, gorgeous, and oozing charisma. She had that effortless charm that made audiences fall in love with her, and for a while she was riding high. But Hollywood is brutal, and when the industry shifted to talkies, Marie's career started slipping. And let's just say she didn't handle it well. At her peak, she was working with some of the biggest directors in town, but even then, she had a bit of a reputation for being headstrong and unpredictable. She liked to party. She had a sharp tongue, and she didn't always play by the rules. But as her career started to decline, that rebellious streak turned into something darker. She became unmanageable, showing up late, arguing with directors, and sometimes just not showing up at all. As you might imagine, the studios had no patience for that kind of behavior, especially from an actress they didn't see as a box office draw anymore. So they pushed back, and it made her 10 times more difficult. The real turning point came when she started drinking heavily. It started out as just a little indulgence here and there, but it later became full-on self-destruction. She was drowning in booze, using it to numb the pain of her fading career. And it didn't take long before the studios washed their hands of her completely. She went from leading lady to barely scraping by, picking up whatever small roles she could just to survive. By the time the 1930s rolled around, Marie was a shell of the star she used to be. She was broke, drinking herself into oblivion, and completely alienated from the industry that once adored her. And then, in one of Hollywood's saddest and most infamous stories, she passed away alone in her tiny apartment in 1937. She had practically wasted away, malnourished and forgotten. And the most haunting part? Her dog had been trapped in the apartment with her for days, desperately trying to wake her up. When the authorities finally found her, the poor dog had been nibbling at her body just to survive. It's the kind of tragic, grim ending that old Hollywood was notorious for. Lena Basquette. There's no easy way to say it. Lena Basquette was the kind of woman who made old Hollywood executives sweat. She was more than a handful to deal with. She was a full-blown firecracker who refused to play by the rules. Studios liked their leading ladies to be glamorous, obedient, and scandal-free, but that wasn't Lena. She was basically the opposite of those things. She had a sharp tongue, a wild streak, and a habit of getting involved with the wrong men, and Hollywood just didn't know what to do with her. She started in silent films and was absolutely stunning on screen, but behind the scenes, she was more interested in stirring up drama than taking direction. She had affairs with powerful men, big-shot producers, directors, even tycoons, and let's just say it didn't always end well. One of these her high-profile relationships was with Sam Warner, one of the Warner Brothers founders. She married him, which should have secured her a permanent spot in Hollywood royalty, but when he died young, she was left fighting with his family over his fortune. And the Warner family? They hated her. They saw her as nothing more than a gold digger and basically blacklisted her from the industry. Not that Lena ever needed help getting into trouble. She was trouble herself. So imagine how people felt when they realized she had a connection to Adolf Hitler. No joke. She claimed he was a huge fan of hers and even invited her to Germany. According to Lena, he wanted to make her a personal guest of the Third Reich. She turned him down, of course, but the whole thing just added to her already chaotic reputation. Pola Negri. Every move she made, every word she spoke, every tear she cried, and there were a lot of those, was dialed up to 100. She came from European silent cinema, where over-the-top drama was the way to go, and she brought that same energy into real life. How did the studios take it? Well, they all loved her at first, until they realized she was just as dramatic off-screen as she was on it. She threw tantrums, made ridiculous demands, and always made sure the spotlight was on her. She even went as far as to fake an illness just to get sympathy. And not just a little cold or a headache. No, she went full soap opera with it. She'd suddenly become too weak to work, collapsing into the arms of a conveniently placed assistant, only to miraculously recover the moment she got her way. And if someone dared to call her out on it, Well, let's just say they weren't going to have a fun day on set. I mean, even her love life was dramatic. When she got involved with Rudolph Valentino, the ultimate heartthrob of silent cinema. It was epic while it lasted, but when he passed suddenly in 1926, Pola saw an opportunity for the performance of a lifetime. She showed up at his funeral in full mourning attire, weeping dramatically, collapsing against his coffin, basically turning the whole thing into her own personal tragedy. People were torn between feeling bad for her and wondering if she was just putting on a show. Spoiler, she definitely was. Betty Hutton. High energy, loud, and completely unstoppable, Betty Hutton was like a human tornado. If you've ever seen her in Annie Get Your Gun in 1950, you know exactly what I mean. She was all wide eyes, big expressions, and go, go, go energy. That worked great on film, but behind the scenes, it made her a nightmare to work with. Directors were constantly at their wits' end with her. She wasn't just enthusiastic, she was exhausting. She had a habit of outperforming everyone around her, which didn't sit well with co-stars who weren't keen on being upstaged. She would over-rehearse scenes to the point of driving everyone crazy, sometimes working herself into a frenzy so intense that she'd actually collapse from exhaustion. And if she didn't like the way something was going, she made sure people knew about it. In fact, one of her biggest blow-ups was with director Cecil B. DeMille on the set of The Greatest Show on Earth in 1952. Now, unlike most other directors, DeMille was not the kind of guy you argued with. He was old-school Hollywood royalty, and his word was law. But Betty didn't care. She was constantly butting heads with him, questioning his choices, and basically running around like a one-woman circus. DeMille reportedly got so fed up that he swore he'd never work with her again. And guess what? He didn't. In the end, it's safe to say Betty's biggest enemy, the people around her. It was herself. She had this deep-seated insecurity that made her need constant reassurance. If she wasn't the center of attention, she'd spiral. That made her clingy with directors, needy with co-stars, and hell for producers who had to deal with her emotional roller coasters. There were stories about her breaking down in tears if she thought someone else was getting more praise than her, and she'd swing from manic excitement to meltdown mode in record time. Eventually, Hollywood just couldn't keep up with her. By the late 1950s, her career was in free fall. The industry that once praised her energy now found her too much to handle, and the offers dried up. Winifred Westover. She was young, beautiful, and talented, but she had one big problem. She absolutely refused to play by Hollywood's rules. If something wasn't going her way, she didn't sulk quietly or try to negotiate. She fought. And in an industry run by men who expected women to be obedient and grateful, that kind of attitude didn't make her many friends. Sadly, her claim to fame was her train wreck of a marriage to silent film legend William S. Hart. Now, Hart was the big deal of Western films. This guy practically invented the cowboy hero. He was rugged, serious, and about 30 years older than Winifred. When they got married in 1921, it should have been a Hollywood fairy tale. Instead, it turned into a messy disaster. So what was the issue? Well, Winifred hated being stuck in Hart's shadow. She wanted a career of her own, but he wanted a traditional wife, and she was not about that life. Recipe for disaster. The marriage lasted less than a year before completely imploding, and their divorce battle was ugly. There were accusations, bitterness, and a whole lot of drama that played out in public. Hart, who had spent his whole career playing tough, honorable cowboys, was humiliated. And Winifred? Well, Hollywood started seeing her as too much trouble. But that wasn't her only issue. Even before her marriage, she had a reputation for being difficult. She had a fiery temper and absolutely refused to take orders from producers or directors. If she didn't like a script, she'd argue about it. If a scene didn't feel right to her, she'd fight to change it. And if someone tried to push her into something she didn't want to do, good luck, because she'd rather walk off set than back down. Even after her divorce, she tried making a comeback, but Hollywood had moved on. The industry had no patience for actresses who were seen as troublemakers, and Winifred had already burned too many bridges. By the late 1920s, she was done. She faded out of the spotlight, leaving behind a reputation as one of silent film's most stubborn, fiery, and impossible to control actresses. Joan Marsh. Joan Marsh was one of those classic Hollywood cases where a child star grows up and refuses to take orders from anyone. She started in the silent film era as an adorable, blonde-haired little darling playing the wide-eyed innocent in early pictures. But by the time she transitioned into more mature roles, that sweet little girl image was long gone. Joan had an attitude, and she wasn't afraid to let everyone know it. You see, the thing about Joan was that she genuinely had talent. She was beautiful, she had comedic timing, and she could act when she wanted to. But working with her, that was a different story. She had a reputation for being incredibly demanding, often showing up to set with a list of complaints before the cameras even started rolling. She would argue with directors over the smallest details, insisting that she knew better than they did. And if she wasn't feeling a particular scene or line, forget it. She'd dig her heels in and refuse to do it until it was rewritten to her liking. Even her co-stars weren't exactly big fans of hers either. Joan had a habit of stealing the spotlight, both on and off screen. She'd upstage other actresses in scenes, sometimes by subtly overacting or shifting her position so the camera favored her instead. If a director tried to correct her, she'd push back, sometimes storming off set or causing delays. One of her biggest issues was that she seemed to think she was a much bigger star than she actually was. She was never a top-tier actress like Bette Davis or Joan Crawford, but you wouldn't know that from the way she carried herself. She expected A-list treatment in a B-list career, and that attitude rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So, by the late 1930s, Hollywood got tired of her antics. The roles started drying up, and Joan eventually faded from the industry, making her last film in the 1940s before disappearing into a quiet post-Hollywood life. She may not have left behind an Oscar-winning legacy, but in terms of being difficult, she absolutely earned her spot in Hollywood's Bad Girls Club. Barbara Payton. Payton had all the makings of a star, and for a while, she was one. She had the looks, the confidence, and that undeniable screen presence that made casting directors sit up and take notice. But there was one problem. Barbara was wild, and not in the charming, rebellious way that some stars could get away with. No, she was full throttle, no brakes, set her own career on fire wild. In essence, her biggest enemy was herself. At first, Hollywood ate her up. She was stunning, blonde, curvy, with a sultry attitude that made her impossible to ignore. She started landing roles in films like Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye in 1950 with James Cagney, and people started calling her the next big thing. But behind the scenes, things were already unraveling. Barbara partied hard. She was drinking heavily, showing up to sets late or sometimes not at all, and making a lot of bad decisions. And then came the relationships. Oh boy, Barbara wasn't just dating famous men, she was destroying them. Her most infamous love triangle? That would be her disastrous affair with actors Franchot Tone and Tom Neal. Now, Tone was a classy, sophisticated actor, old Hollywood royalty. Tom Neal, on the other hand, was a rough-around-the-edges B-movie tough guy. Barbara bounced between the two like a human wrecking ball. It all came to a head in 1951 when Neal brutally beat Tone so badly that he ended up in the hospital with a broken nose, a concussion, and brain damage. And where was Barbara during all of this? Taking Neal back. That scandal was Hollywood poison, and studios wanted nothing to do with her after that. After that, her career fell fast. She was too much of a liability, too unpredictable, too much bad press, and way too much drama. The offers dried up, and Barbara turned to smaller and smaller roles before she eventually ended up completely out of the industry. But instead of stepping away gracefully, she spiraled hard. The drinking got worse, the bad relationships kept coming, and before long she was completely broke, turning to selling her body just to survive.
Jean Arthur's journey through Hollywood was unlike any other. With a career that spanned over 3 decades, she delivered performances that have since become benchmarks of the golden age of cinema. Yet, for someone so visible on the silver screen, Arthur was a figure of profound privacy, her off-screen life a stark contrast to the characters she so vivaciously brought to life. But who was Jean Arthur truly? Beyond the laughter and the acclaim, beyond the roles that made her a household name, there lay a woman of complexity, a soul who sought solace away from the cacophony of fame. Arthur's reluctance to embrace her celebrity status, her battles with anxiety, and her eventual retreat from Hollywood form a narrative as compelling as any of her films. This video seeks to peel back the layers of Jean Arthur's quiet radiance, to explore the dichotomy of a woman who was both a beacon of talent on screen and an enigma off it. From her early days in silent films to her unforgettable roles in classics directed by the likes of Frank Capra and George Stevens, we delve into the life of a woman who, despite her best efforts to remain out of the limelight, left an indelible mark on the industry and on the hearts of those who watched her. The rise of Jean Arthur. Jean Arthur's journey to becoming a beloved icon of Hollywood's golden age is a tale of resilience, talent, and an unmistakable voice that captivated audiences worldwide. Born Gladys Georgiana Green in 1900 in Plattsburgh, New York, Arthur's early life was marked by frequent moves, reflecting a restless spirit that would later define her career. Her entry into the world of acting was not a straightforward path. It was paved with the kind of determination and grit that characterized many of Hollywood's self-made stars. Arthur's foray into acting began in the early 1920s, a time when the film industry was undergoing significant transformations. The silent era was in full swing, and Hollywood was a burgeoning hub of creativity and innovation. Arthur's initial roles were small, often uncredited parts in silent films, where her distinctive presence began to draw attention. Despite the limitations of these early roles, Arthur's persistence paid off, leading to more substantial parts that showcased her range and depth as an actress. The transition from silent films to talkies in the late 1920s and early 1930s was a tumultuous period for many actors, whose careers were abruptly ended by the new demand for a different kind of on-screen presence. However, for Arthur, the advent of sound cinema provided an opportunity to leverage her most unique asset, her voice. Described as a mix of a squeak and a melodious lilt, Arthur's voice became her signature, setting her apart from her contemporaries and endearing her to audiences and critics alike. Arthur's breakthrough came with her role in The Whole Town's Talking, 1935, a performance that showcased her comedic timing and charm. However, it was her collaboration with director Frank Capra that catapulted her to stardom. Films like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, 1936, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 1939, not only solidified her status as a leading lady, but also highlighted her ability to bring depth and authenticity to her characters, traits that would define her career. Despite her success, Arthur's relationship with fame was complex. Known for her reclusive nature and discomfort with the Hollywood publicity machine, Arthur's off-screen life was shrouded in mystery, a stark contrast to the vivacious and approachable characters she portrayed. The craft of comedy. Jean Arthur's ascent to the zenith of Hollywood stardom was marked by her unparalleled mastery of the screwball comedy genre, a style of film that became immensely popular during the 1930s and 1940s. This genre, known for its fast-paced dialogue, complex plots, and blend of slapstick with a sophisticated wit, found its perfect muse in Arthur. Her performances in Mr. Deeds Goes to Town and The Lady Eve are emblematic of her ability to navigate the intricate dynamics of screwball comedy, showcasing her talent for combining wit, charm, and a palpable sense of vulnerability. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, 1936, directed by Frank Capra, was a pivotal film in Arthur's career. Cast opposite Gary Cooper, Arthur played the role of Babe Bennett, a sharp-witted reporter who falls for Longfellow deeds. Cooper, a simple man who inherits a vast fortune. Arthur's portrayal of Bennett was a masterclass in the screwball heroine archetype, intelligent, independent, and morally complex. Her on-screen chemistry with Cooper was electric, and her performance earned critical acclaim, solidifying her status as one of the era's leading ladies in comedy. However, it was perhaps her role in The Lady Eve, 1941, directed by Preston Sturges, that fully showcased Arthur's comedic genius. Though Barbara Stanwyck played the lead in The Lady Eve, Arthur's roles in similar screwball comedies of the era, such as The More the Merrier, 1943, demonstrated her adeptness at this genre. Her ability to deliver rapid-fire dialogue with precision, coupled with her comedic timing and the inherent warmth she brought to her characters, made her performances stand out. Arthur's characters often challenged societal norms, embodying a modern woman's spirit who was both assertive and feminine. Arthur's unique appeal in the screwball comedy genre lay in her ability to blend humor with heart. Her characters were not mere caricatures, they were imbued with a depth and complexity that resonated with audiences. Arthur herself brought a sense of authenticity to these roles, drawing on her personal experiences and inner resilience. Off-screen, Arthur was known for her shyness and aversion to the Hollywood limelight, traits that contrasted sharply with the confident women she portrayed on screen. This juxtaposition between her private self and her public persona added layers to her performances, making her characters all the more compelling. Arthur's contribution to the screwball comedy genre extended beyond her individual performances. She helped define the archetype of the screwball heroine, a woman who was equal parts intellect, humor, and heart. This archetype would influence countless films and performances in the genre, leaving a legacy that endures in cinematic history. Jean Arthur's mastery of screwball comedy, highlighted in films like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town and through her body of work in the genre, showcases her as one of the definitive leading ladies of her era. Her ability to convey wit, charm, and vulnerability on screen not only endeared her to audiences, but also cemented her place in Hollywood's golden age as a symbol of comedic and dramatic excellence. Arthur and Capra, a cinematic partnership. The collaboration between Jean Arthur and Frank Capra is one of Hollywood's most celebrated director-actor partnerships, emblematic of a period when cinema was as much about entertainment as it was about conveying poignant social messages. This partnership flourished during the 1930s, a time of significant social and economic upheaval in the United States. Capra, with his deeply ingrained belief in the goodness of the common man and his critique of unchecked power, found in Arthur not just a talented actress, but a conduit for his themes of integrity, resilience, and social justice. Their collaboration produced several films, but none more significant than Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 1939, a film that has come to define American ideals of democracy and individual agency. Arthur played Clarissa Saunders, a savvy and cynical secretary who helps the film's protagonist, Jefferson Smith, played by James Stewart, navigate the complexities of American politics. Arthur's performance, marked by a blend of skepticism and eventual inspiration, perfectly complemented Capra's vision of an America where ordinary individuals can make a difference. The success of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington was due in no small part to the synergy between Capra's direction and Arthur's performance. Capra's socially conscious storytelling, which often tackled themes of corruption, media manipulation, and the loss of innocence, found its ideal expression in Arthur's characters, who often embodied a blend of idealism and pragmatism. This dynamic allowed Capra's films to resonate on a deeply emotional level, with Arthur serving as the relatable, human element in his grand narratives. Arthur's collaboration with Capra was not limited to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Their partnership also produced Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, 1936, and You Can't Take It With You, 1938, films that similarly explored themes of simplicity, honesty, and the value of community. In each of these films, Arthur's performances were critical to grounding Capra's ideals in relatable human terms. Her ability to convey complex emotions with subtlety and depth provided the perfect foil to Capra's larger-than-life characters and situations. Beyond her work with Capra, Arthur's career was also marked by her collaboration with another legendary director, John Ford, in The Whole Town's Talking, 1935. While her partnership with Ford was not as extensive as with Capra, it further showcased her versatility as an actress and her ability to adapt to different directorial styles. Ford, known for his portrayal of American myths and landscapes, utilized Arthur's talent to explore themes of identity and redemption, adding another layer to her already diverse career. The Reluctant Star. Jean Arthur's luminous presence on the silver screen belied a deeply private nature, a paradox that defined her career and personal life. Despite her undeniable talent and the acclaim that came with it, Arthur was known for her shyness and aversion to the Hollywood limelight, a reluctance that stood in stark contrast to the bold, spirited characters she portrayed. This chapter delves into the complexities of Arthur's stardom, exploring how her reluctance to embrace fame contrasted sharply with her on-screen persona and professional success. Arthur's preference for privacy over public accolades was well known within the industry. Unlike many of her contemporaries, she eschewed the typical trappings of Hollywood fame, rarely appearing at public events or participating in the studio's publicity efforts beyond what was contractually required. Interviews with Arthur were scarce, and she was known to be uncomfortable with the fanfare and attention that came with her profession. This reticence extended to her personal life, which she guarded fiercely, leading to much speculation and mystery surrounding the actress. Despite her aversion to the spotlight, Arthur's talent could not be contained. On screen, she exuded a natural warmth and charisma, endearing her to audiences and making her one of the most beloved actresses of her time. Her ability to convey strength, vulnerability, and humor, often simultaneously, made her performances compelling and relatable. Arthur's work with directors like Frank Capra highlighted her unique appeal, showcasing her as the quintessential everywoman who embodied American ideals of integrity and resilience. The contrast between Arthur's public and private selves raises questions about the nature of stardom and the expectations placed on public figures. Arthur's career coincided with the golden age of Hollywood, a time when stars were expected to maintain a certain image and availability to their fans. Her reluctance to participate in this aspect of her profession was seen as unconventional, even problematic, by studio executives who relied on star power to promote their films. Yet, Arthur's insistence on maintaining her privacy can also be viewed as a form of resistance against the commodification of celebrity and an assertion of her autonomy. Arthur's shyness and preference for privacy did not diminish her professional dedication. Colleagues and directors often spoke of her commitment to her craft, her meticulous preparation for roles, and her ability to transform once the cameras were rolling. This professionalism, coupled with her natural talent, ensured that Arthur's career thrived despite her aversion to the spotlight. Pioneering feminine archetypes. In an era when women on screen were often relegated to secondary or stereotypical roles, Arthur's characters stood out for their strength, intelligence, and independence. Her portrayal of such roles contributed to evolving representations of women in cinema, offering audiences a glimpse of a more nuanced and empowered female identity. Arthur's characters were often women ahead of their time, navigating professional and personal challenges with a blend of resilience and grace. In Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, she plays a savvy reporter who, despite her initial cynicism, reveals a deep capacity for empathy and integrity. Similarly, in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Arthur portrays a seasoned political aide who becomes an invaluable ally to James Stewart's idealistic senator, showcasing her character's intelligence and political acumen. These roles, among others, positioned Arthur as an actress capable of conveying complex female experiences, breaking away from the damsel in distress archetype prevalent in many films of the era. Arthur's on-screen personas resonated with the emerging sensibilities of a society on the cusp of significant social change. The 1930s and 1940s were decades marked by economic turmoil, war, and the beginning of shifts in gender dynamics. Women were entering the workforce in unprecedented numbers, and their roles within the family and society at large were beginning to evolve. Arthur's characters reflected this shift, embodying the aspirations and challenges of a generation of women seeking greater autonomy and recognition. Moreover, Arthur's collaboration with directors like Frank Capra further amplified her impact on the portrayal of women in cinema. Capra's films, known for their social commentary and exploration of American ideals, provided Arthur with a platform to showcase her range as an actress and to bring to life characters that were both relatable and inspirational. Her performances in Capra's films not only entertained, but also provoked thought about the role of women in society, their capacity for leadership, and their right to pursue personal and professional fulfillment. Jean Arthur's contribution to cinema extends beyond her individual performances to include her influence on the portrayal of women on screen. By taking on roles that challenged traditional gender roles, Arthur paved the way for future generations of actresses. Her legacy is evident in the increasingly complex and diverse representations of women in film, a testament to her enduring impact on the industry. Arthur's reluctance to embrace the trappings of fame, coupled with her commitment to portraying strong, intelligent women, underscores the duality of her legacy. Off-screen, she was a private individual who shied away from the spotlight, yet on screen, she represented a progressive vision of womanhood. This duality enriches Arthur's legacy, making her not just a celebrated actress of Hollywood's golden age, but also a pioneering figure in the evolution of women's representation in cinema. The transition to stage and television. Jean Arthur's transition from the silver screen to the stage and television marked a significant shift in her career, reflecting her desire to explore different facets of acting and to engage with new audiences. This chapter delves into the later part of Arthur's career, highlighting her notable stage performances and her role in the television series The Jean Arthur Show, underscoring her continued impact on the performing arts. After achieving considerable success in Hollywood, Arthur's career took a turn as she began to seek opportunities beyond film. Her move towards stage and television was driven by a combination of factors, including her well-documented discomfort with the Hollywood system and her desire for more challenging and diverse roles. Arthur's foray into theater was not just a departure from film, but a return to her roots. Before her Hollywood fame, she had experience in New York's theater scene, which had initially honed her acting skills. One of Arthur's most significant stage roles came in 1950, when she starred in the Broadway production of Peter Pan as Peter. Her performance was lauded for its energy and whimsy, capturing the eternal youthfulness of the character and showcasing Arthur's versatility as an actress. This role, among others, demonstrated Arthur's ability to captivate live audiences, just as she had film audiences, with her unique charm and talent. Arthur's transition to television was highlighted by The Jean Arthur Show in 1966, where she played a lawyer. The show was an attempt to capitalize on Arthur's enduring appeal, offering her a platform to reach a new generation of viewers. Despite the show's short run, it was a testament to Arthur's willingness to embrace new challenges and to adapt to the changing dynamics of the entertainment industry. Arthur's work in stage and television during the latter part of her career is indicative of her broader impact on the performing arts. She brought the same depth and nuance to her stage and television roles as she did to her film characters, challenging traditional gender roles and paving the way for future generations of actresses. Her characters often embodied strength, intelligence, and independence, contributing to evolving representations of women in cinema and beyond. Moreover, Arthur's transition highlights the fluidity between different mediums of acting, underscoring the idea that talent transcends the platform. Her ability to move between film, stage, and television with ease and success is a testament to her skill as an actress and her dedication to her craft. In examining the later part of Jean Arthur's career, we see a performer who was not content to rest on her laurels, but was driven by a passion for acting and a desire to explore the full range of her abilities. Her contributions to stage and television are an essential part of her legacy, showcasing her versatility and her continued relevance in the world of performing arts. The legacy of a reluctant star. Reflecting on Jean Arthur's enduring legacy in Hollywood requires an appreciation of her unique position within the pantheon of Golden Age cinema. Arthur's contributions to the film industry during her active years were profound, not only in terms of the memorable characters she brought to life, but also in how she navigated her career with a rare blend of integrity and talent. This chapter focuses on Arthur's impact on the film industry, her influence on contemporary actresses, and her lasting symbol as an exemplar of grace and professionalism in an industry often criticized for its excesses. Jean Arthur's legacy in Hollywood is anchored in her performances, which often broke the mold of traditional female roles. Her characters were strong, intelligent, and independent, embodying a modern woman who could stand on equal footing with her male counterparts. This was a significant departure from the more conventional portrayals of women in cinema at the time, making Arthur a forerunner in the evolution of female characters in Hollywood. Films like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and The More the Merrier not only showcased her talent, but also her ability to portray women of substance and complexity. Arthur's influence extends beyond the roles she played. Her approach to her career and her life in Hollywood set her apart. Known for her aversion to the limelight and her dedication to her craft, Arthur chose roles that resonated with her personally and professionally, rather than those that would merely elevate her star status. This principled approach to acting, coupled with her natural talent, made her a role model for actresses of her time and for generations to come. Giovanni Jackson, Daddy's Girl,